What's up, everybody? Just want to take a quick second and let people know that I am self-supported. I now put all of my episodes on Substack for paid subscribers. I put them up early, and then 24 hours later, I release them to the public on all my platforms. I also have Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, Buy Me a Coffee, Zelle, a P.O. Box, and Locals, Patreon. And all of the links are in the show notes of every single episode I put out. So look forward to continuing to provide great conversations. And thank you all for your continued support. I had this whole plan. Dave and Aaron, we're going to come on, talk about technocracy and big tech, and we're still going to do that, but you can't help but we got to take a little bit of a detour because, Dave, it feels like things have changed for you in the last couple of days. So thank you both for coming on. And I want to start off with Dave, jump into this to, what has life been like since the Tucker episode dropped 2 days ago?
Well, I would say quite generally the support was extraordinary. I might have even said to you I was worried that it would be boring, right? And I couldn't remember what we talked about because we spent an hour and a half before the interview and an hour and a half after the interview, so I couldn't separate the different topics that we talked about. And so I'm thinking, God, I was watching all of Tucker's interviews and thinking, there's no way I can hold up to these guys. But it seemed to go well. And if you look at the comment section, seemed to be emphatic support. So I would say overall it went well. But a couple of loonies have gotten a hold of it and found one line taken out of context to make a big shit fit over it, and if they want to fight, I'll give it to them.
So two things. One, is there anything you want to clarify from this clip that's been going around?
Well, so I quoted Patton, it turns out. So I was talking about World War II being a problem, and you and we had a podcast with Diana West, and they started beating on her, and she says, "Don't worry about it. My book's selling like crazy now." But I said that World War II is not being told accurately, and I'd read about a half a dozen books and kind of wrote a little what I called a mini Dale Cooper type chapter. And at one point, I quoted Patton, in which I said, "Look, arguments can be made that we should have sided with the Germans and side." Might have said Hitler. That's always a catchphrase, and fought Stalin, and it turns out, and then after that, I said that's actually what Patton said, and then I followed that with the statement that it might have, for example, cut off caused the Holocaust not to occur if those alignments. And if you read the history of World War II, the alignments of the different countries with each other were very ambiguous. It wasn't clear at the very beginning of the war who was going to side with whom and what direction it was going to go. And certainly the Germans were most afraid of the Soviets. And so the Looney Tunes have gotten a hold of that one phrase that I took from Stalin. I took from Patton and credited Patton. And have now said that I've endorsed Hitler, and so they can fuck themselves. But Mark Levin got a hold of it. My ESP instincts were firing last week because last week I actually put out a tweet that said I'm watching Mark Levin, and if you think it's because I like what he says, you're dreaming. He's the biggest pain in the ass propagandist on the planet or something. I think it was more off color than that, but so I kind of somehow instinctively knew something was coming. I don't know, but then Laura Loomer got a hold of it, and she's humping and pumping. Now, what's interesting is when you read the comments to these people's comments, they get eviscerated. The guys selling this, they said, "Are you completely unaware of what he said? Did you listen? Did you listen to the video? Did you?" Are you not aware that he quoted Patton? Are you not aware that he said it might have prevented the Holocaust? Are you not aware of any of that? So it was nonstop attack. And so in that sense, it came out fine. But, Mark Levin has a habit of sitting there for a half an hour on the weekends, just spewing vitriolic shit at people. And And I had previously concluded that the source, the proximate source of growing anti-Semitism are actually those who are accusing everyone who questions Israel to be an anti-Semite. So it makes those people pretty hateful. They're getting pretty tired of being called an anti-Semite as they question whether Israel should be killing tens of thousands of innocent people. And so then Ted Cruz jumped in because he's a whore and he's totally owned by Israel. And as you just showed me, I hadn't seen it, but he said this is just inexcusable. And so I'm thinking, well, Ted, you're inexcusable, so you can bite me. I'd love for, this is a standing offer, I'll go on any show with Ted Cruz and Mark Levin and we'll shoot it out. We'll have an octagon fight because I think they're just complete shitheads.
This episode is brought to you by McIlvaney Financial Group. Their advisors bring a depth of knowledge and experience that allow them to serve their clientele with care, ensuring their financial needs are met now and in the future. Personally, I'm not saying cash is worthless, but you can see what's happening. It's worth less every year. Gold is the opposite. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to www.mcilvaney.com/coffeeandamike. Did you think that before?
Yes. Yeah. Did you watch Tucker tear Cruz apart?
Yeah, I saw that clip. Well, and you know, so this is what my thought was, like watching all this and watching it unfold on X yesterday was.
See, I didn't even notice it until people started to tell me.
Oh yeah, I messaged Aaron. I said this is going to be an interesting conversation. I didn't know if this was going to happen because I figured you're just getting slammed.
Well, it would have been interesting if I hadn't seen it and I was busy and I hadn't looked at my email or anything and I got on and you said, "Did you know you're being attacked?" No, I don't know. So.
Well, but I also look at it, you know, and you correct me, and Aaron, if you want to jump in anytime, please feel free. But they're going after Tucker, right? Like this.
That's really, I was going to say that. So I am just an afterthought. It's another Tucker guest is what I am. I've become another Tucker guest. But now you've got things like sort of local Cornell Reddit threads and stuff jumping on this. And so they will try to make for them, the home field advantage for them is to go at me, not Tucker. And so it'll get interesting.
And you're experiencing that now. So
well, one of my former grad students sent me a screen grab of an email where someone was poking and prodding for comments about my support of Hitler or something. So someone's fishing.
Yeah, Meghan McCain, she chimed in yesterday on X too. I saw.
Really? What did she say?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I didn't have it.
You know, the safest thing is to just announce the statement. I mean, that's the cowardice of the political elite.
Well, and it's also, you know, this is the neocon media that shows you what, I mean, in my opinion, that Tucker is a threat to them. And this is an opportunity to, you know, use you to go after him. And also, I wonder with this, might this be some type of intimidation so people that go on Tucker's show, either to discourage them from going on, and B, if they do go on, maybe they'll be hesitant to speak.
Yeah, if someone comes at me, they could lose some teeth. I mean,
no, I mean on a go forward. I mean on a go forward basis. So for guests.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying. The way you deal with these guys, the way you deal with a bully is just smack them. So I intend to write them. You know, you know me. Only recently have I begun to question Israel publicly. I think the last time we were on, I said, look, I realized that I'd crossed the dotted line from not understanding the situation, which I clearly tried to understand the Middle East. You can't. I'm sympathetic to a country surrounded by its enemies and this and that. But I realized I'd kind of crossed the dotted line and ended up in the category of a bit cowardice. So I decided that I had to say something because I think the Israelis are killing just too many people too ruthlessly. And I don't want to go to my grave saying that I kept my mouth shut. And so I'm going to write about it. And Levin's giving me more material.
You're going to put on your Substack? Good way.
No, I'm going to put it in my year in review. Oh. It'll give me plenty of time to ponder it.
You know, well, and the other thing is, too, with this is like there are people that are I don't know, like after COVID, I got to a point I just don't trust any governments anymore, right? I have no faith in any of them and I don't trust them. But
Well,
you
they lie, right?
right, and
They
you
just
have
lie.
people, they are just so bent on this issue, and it's like no objectivity, no nothing. Like
Right.
that's what's amazing to me about this whole thing. And they literally see a clip and they didn't even, unless it was all coordinated or something. Like there's no critical thought or common sense. That's not, that clip is not what they did with
Well,
it.
a couple weeks ago, I was watching several fights between the so-called thought leaders, Candace Owens and someone, Candace Owens and Fuentes, and a couple others. I remember thinking, this is incredibly stupid that these various thought leaders are hurling shit bombs at each other. And I remember thinking, don't let yourself get sucked into that. And all of a sudden, here I am a week or two later, and they're trying to suck me into it. And the people who watched the interview are all coming to my defense. In fact, until either Loomer or Levin or one of these guys picked up on it, there wasn't even in the comment section, not even a hint of someone saying that Hitler part was wrong. Because in context, it made total sense. So Mark Levin is a despicable human being who really, if he got hit by a truck, I'd be fine.
Do you now that the interview's been posted and it's been a few days, what are your thoughts on the conversation that you had with him?
I think it was better than I was worried. I mean, I'd forgotten how much territory we covered. And I think the idea of saying here are all these different plots, none of which hold up to scrutiny, to the point where it's absurd, right? And it gets to the question of are we being lied to at every level, every story, every narrative? As soon as you're told you can't talk about something, then you know they're lying, right? When the censorship shows up, then you know you're over the target. So, and Aaron knows this.
Yeah, no, this is exactly the case. I mean, I've experienced it. We've all experienced it, but it's backfiring. All of this is backfiring horrendously. So, I mean, I think this is going to
I
end
think
up
so.
being very beneficial for Dave, and it's backfiring for Levin, and it's backfiring for Loomer in a massive way.
Mm-hmm. It's the Streisand effect, right? And I think people are getting tired of it, right? And I think people are, you couldn't talk about the Ukraine war, you couldn't talk about COVID, you couldn't talk about anything. And so, and Tucker and I spent a lot of time on free speech issues, right? And so that was well timed, in my opinion. That was good. There was nothing that went down during the interview that I said, oh shit, I'd love to reel that one back in. Nothing left me regretting. I could end up regretting quoting Patton, but I don't think many people think George Patton is an irresponsible, anti-American kind of guy. So,
Well, and also I think summarize. First of all, I thought the conversation was great, and I'm happy. I know it was something that you wanted to do, and I think that who knows, maybe you end up on Rogan. Maybe this is what catapults you onto Rogan after this.
Could be. You never know. I got invited to do. Here's one. Should I do it? Is the question. I got invited to join Alex Jones.
Oh.
And that one's a little different because that one you never know. If Rogan, Tucker, Jones could go off the rails pretty quick. But probably we'll do it.
You gonna go down there?
I have no idea. He hasn't formalized it. He just said, I've been a big fan, which I think is bullshit. And I think someone pointed him to it, and he said, okay, I got to talk to this guy. And he used a clip of me and some stuff about, the Jews or whatever. So it could get dangerous. But Alex has earned a place on the stage. He's one of these guys who told us about stuff that seemed completely preposterous, that now in retrospect you realize he might not have gotten everything right, but he certainly was also over the target, including, in my opinion, Sandy Hook. I don't think that the angle he took was necessarily correct, but there are fishy aspects to the Sandy Hook story, and of course they took him down to the studs with a lawsuit pressing that story, but and it could be a very darkly incorrect story. I'm just not sure. I had a long chat with a famous podcaster who became very front and center, testified to Congress, kind of anti-vaxxer, years before, and don't say his name if you happen to know who I'm talking about.
Michael Ferris?
Years before.
Michael Ferris?
Yeah, Michael Ferris, yeah.
He's becoming a legend.
Sandy Hook, and he was convinced that Sandy Hook was fucked up from head to toe. The best case against Sandy Hook is Robbie Parker's smirk. You ever seen Robbie Parker?
No.
So here's a guy who supposedly lost his daughter that day. She got shot. Aaron, do you have kids?
I do.
So his daughter got shot, and he's about to walk up to the microphone for a press conference. And they follow him up to the microphone, and he's smiling the whole way. And then he gets to the microphone, and all of a sudden this droopy, horrid face comes on. You seen that?
Yeah, I've seen that. I have seen that.
And you go, there's no way that's the face. There's no way that makes sense, right? It's one of those, I don't know what it means, but it makes no sense. As a parent who just lost a kid, you wouldn't even generate a nervous smirk. You wouldn't smile for the next 6 months. And there's Robbie Parker walking up to the mic with a big smirky smile on his face. He gets to the mic, and all of a sudden he's blubbering. And so there's something wrong.
One of the things you said in your conversation with Tucker, talking about the Bitcoin and the crypto world, and
those guys are going to jump us a little bit too.
I've been getting it. You know what? I've been getting that. I'll tell you, where I'm getting attacked is the boomers and the crypto. I had a guy. Here's what's so funny. I had a guy, and he lives in Phoenix apparently, and he's like, "You and all the shit coiners, you're going to get what you deserve." And then I said, "Okay, so you're attacking me." And he goes, "Oh, sorry, I have a short fuse, but I'd love to meet up with you when you're if you have time, because we live in the same city." I'm like, "Oh yeah, great. That's just what I want to do."
Right.
Like it's amazing, Aaron. I haven't even talked to you since that. Like some of it I think is based on my conversation with Aaron. Like people are attacking me. I'm like, look, I'm not an expert. Like I just ask questions, and you can't tell me, or I shouldn't say you can't. You guys can, let you guys get your thoughts on it, but they're centralizing this.
Well, they have centralized it. I'm surprised they're even bothering to engage with you. What they've done with me is they've blocked me. Everyone from Max Kaiser to Michael Saylor to most of the Bitcoin core devs, their strategy has been to actually just suppress conversation about it entirely. They literally have a GitHub with a list of accounts that they go in and proactively block.
And you're pro-Bitcoin. And you're pro-Bitcoin.
Well, I'm pro-crypto. I'm not pro-Bitcoin.
Right.
And so I'm pro the original white paper and the use of Bitcoin as peer-to-peer cash as an alternative to central bank currencies. I'm not in favor of the hijacked version of it that is now digital surveillance gold. And I talk quite a bit about that, and people don't want to hear about how bad it really is. They don't want to hear who was involved, people with ties to the intelligence community. They don't want to hear that Epstein was actually involved. There was this whole transfer of, who was working on the development of Bitcoin. It went from the Bitcoin Foundation to MIT, headed by this guy, Joi Ito, who was funded by Epstein, amongst others. And while they were funding these changes to Bitcoin to make it digital gold instead of digital cash, they started working on 3 CBDC pilots for the U.S. MIT is actually the lead innovator in CBDC technology for the globe. There are other countries that are actually now working with MIT on their CBDC rollouts. Well, because of this transfer that happened, you actually have some Bitcoin core developers that were working on the U.S. CBDC pilots. And so no one wants to talk about that in Bitcoin. They want that information completely suppressed.
So I thought your treatment of crypto in your book, so Max is still following me, and I thought he might not, because I sometimes use Max and Stacy as my literary crutch, where I say, look, do you really think the elites are going to let Max and Stacy and John Saylor take over the role of the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers? And the answer is no chance. 0 chance, 0.0 chance, right? And so So the hope of the hodlers. Now, I did a podcast with Marty Bent last week and with Rudy Havenstein, and it went fine. We didn't talk much Bitcoin, but I think there are Bitcoiners who fully understand the battle ahead and what could go wrong. And these are guys I really respect. And then there's the cultists who just think that they are not touchable. And I go, you don't know anything about history. You don't know anything about markets. You're unaware of the fact that the state will stomp on your face. And they can do it.
Well, they're unaware, but to me, a lot of the people that were early in Bitcoin that remain maxis, even despite it being hijacked, I mean, I like to say that, they used to look at central bankers with disgust, and then it turns out it was envy. They actually want to be like the central bankers. When you hear them talk about Bitcoin, they'll show these pyramid structures where, well, if you have this many Bitcoin, you're going to have your own citadel and you're going to be on top of the rest of society. So they've abandoned the idea that the whole purpose of this is to be something that liberates and provides economic freedom for the world. They're just now saying, well, there's going to be a new pyramid structure. And I mean, to your point, these guys are going to be the ones that replace the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. And it's not going to happen. But more importantly, why is it that that's now what they want to have happen?
I don't know. I think they've lost sight. But did you see Andreessen's podcast with Rogan and then a follow-up with Lex Friedman? So
I saw the one with Rogan.
And he clearly went on that show with a purpose, right? He didn't just go on that show to chat and find his way to the things he said. He said, look, this is Rogan. I'm going to lock and load. And I'm going to let it go. And he talked about the debanking and all the stuff that's being done. I was on a podcast the other day with two guys. Again, I don't hold it. There's hodlers I really respect. And then there's the ones I just think you guys are cannon fodder. But I was on this podcast and they were making various arguments that just weren't making sense to me. And like they talk about, the U.S. adopting Bitcoin to somehow, back their treasuries. And I go, I don't see how that's supposed to work. I said, I asked them what percentage of the Bitcoin have been already played out, right? And the answer is like 95%, right? I said, so the U.S. is going to turn to a currency of which they currently own zero? And they're somehow going to depend on that? How's that going to work?
Well, no, they don't own zero. They have 200,000, and they acquired it through civil asset forfeiture, which is, of course, theft. But this actually highlights one of the main problems about Bitcoin, which is that it is a public ledger. There aren't many transactions because it's been artificially hobbled. And so the government can now track everybody's Bitcoin. It's actually more surveillable than physical gold. It's more surveillable even than a traditional bank account at this point, because there are organizations like Chainalysis that are compiling all of these transactions. All you have to do is identify one transaction and you can see somebody's entire chain. And so this is why it's been fairly easy. People will say, well, but it's censorship resistant. They can't force you to move your Bitcoin. And that's true. But if they can identify that it's you, and they come to you with a proposition that says, spend the rest of your life in prison or give us your private keys, so far people have turned over their private keys. And so that's the real big problem with the transparency of this. It's actually so bad that over the last few months, a bunch of people, three now, people have reached out to me that were in either a divorce situation or a dispute with a business partner. And it turns out now that private investigators are getting certification in Chainalysis. And so now this becomes part of these, proceedings where they're able to get through discovery the entire transaction history on Bitcoin. So it's a pretty scary proposition. So yeah, you're not going to defeat the state if the state can see all of your transactions and can whitelist or blacklist your coins based on whatever criteria they determine, making Bitcoin essentially non-fungible. So this is a real problem, and people don't want to talk about it. But you're not going to defeat governments this way.
When I was listening to your book, and you did this unbelievably detailed step-by-step how to make a wallet and stuff like that, and it actually convince me that there's no way I'm going to do it because it sounds hard enough, even laid out step by step. But you mentioned that there's Bitcoin 21 million upper limit, and then you mentioned some other Bitcoin, which I can't remember the names, but you can say what they are, whatever. There's some Bitcoin light or Bitcoin this or Bitcoin that. And I go, so on the podcast, I said, so Bitcoin has a cap of 21 million, but there's no cap on the number of Bitcoin varieties.
There's no cap on the number of Bitcoin varieties. That by the way, the back half of the book is completely outdated. I've actually switched. I wrote that 2.5 years ago or so. I've actually moved entirely into privacy coins. So even the recommendations there are I don't recommend those wallets. I don't even recommend those coins, which is why I say it's important for the update.
Get the new book, yeah.
Yeah, but the one thing which I haven't uploaded yet, but the one thing that I want to say is that Bitcoin is not limited to 21 million coins. This is one of the biggest fallacies about Bitcoin. And when you read the white paper and you understand what it was originally about, the whole point of Bitcoin was to be digital cash that you used for day-to-day transactions. And it was supposed to have low fees. So the whole point was this was something designed to compete with Visa and MasterCard. This was something that in fairly short order was supposed to be able to do 25,000, 50,000 transactions per second.
Kind of a blockchain PayPal then or something like that.
Yeah. This was really, it was supposed to be a currency. It was never, digital gold store of value was never part of the proposition. This wasn't discussed in the original design. So here's the problem with this. There's an economic system. So the way that Bitcoin works is every 10 minutes, new Bitcoin are mined. So there are computers all over the world competing to solve math puzzles, increasingly difficult math problems, or the difficulty changes so that you can basically get a 10-minute block times. And whoever wins that math puzzle gets to add the next batch of transactions to the blockchain. Well, the problem with this is, so it started out, I believe it was 50 coins every 10 minutes were created, and then it halves every 4 years. So it goes from 50 every 10 minutes to 25 to 12 and a half, et cetera, and eventually tapers off. But the whole point of the block rewards was to serve as an economic incentive for people to mine and secure the network until the transaction volume picked up. So the whole model for Bitcoin is miners are supposed to make money not on these rewards, block rewards, but by producing and adding a lot of transactions, thousands, if not millions of transactions every 10 minutes where they get a fee on this. By artificially reducing the size of the blocks, there are almost no fees now. So miners are literally just gambling to get the block reward, but there's no transaction fee element to this. So the entire economic structure and incentive.
So it's not self-funded anymore then. So it's not self-funded anymore.
It's not self-funded. And one of the early core developers, there was an HBO documentary last year and there was a whole prediction market thing trying to say who Satoshi is. And this HBO documentary, which I'm sure was a, targeted plant, but suggested that this developer named Peter Todd is Satoshi Nakamoto. Well, if you actually follow Peter Todd and look at what he's saying now, for years, he's been saying that we're going to have to increase the supply of Bitcoin from 21 million to a larger amount because we're going to need more coins to be able to make the incentives work for miners. So if you look at the prospectus, if you look at any of these ETFs on Bitcoin, they all have as a risk factor that they very well might have to increase the 21 million supply. So it is not capped at 21 million. It will, and a lot of things might happen, but with the AI wars heating up now, and the U.S. is going to have to increase the energy output by 1,000x to compete with China to try to get to this race to AGI, which is a whole other conversation. But
we don't have 1,000x anywhere in sight. We
don't. So whatever it is they're going to use is going to drive up the price of energy. And so this is going to make it very difficult for American companies to be able to mine profitably. And if you look at what's going on, essentially they're gambling now. Since there's no transaction fee revenue, you have people that are investing $50, $100, $150 million in data centers with really high fixed costs, where all they're really doing is solving math problems with the hope that they get this reward every 10 minutes with the expectation that the price is going to continue to go up because there's no transaction volume.
So
it's actually kind of insane.
It's kind of a Ponzi scheme, yeah.
It's a Ponzi scheme. And so so what is required now for the price to go up is to force the government, to use taxpayer money and civil asset forfeiture and other things to buy it. I mean, we're at the point where, based on where the market cap is, that's the only place to go. And I don't know that countries are actually going to do that. It sounds like we're now not going to do that with at least taxpayer money. They might continue to do civil asset forfeiture, but
that's free.
Yeah, no, that's free. And by the way, you should be worried about that. I mean, how long?
Well, they've been doing it on the highways for decades.
Well, that's what I say to people. I mean, are we at a point right now where you get pulled over for a speeding ticket and they ask to look at your cell phone and they confiscate your cell phone and try to take all your Bitcoin. I mean, that sounds outlandish, but it isn't based on the civil asset forfeiture process. And so this is why I'm not an advocate for Bitcoin. It doesn't solve the problem of having an alternative to either central bank digital currencies or stable coins, which are now backdoor central bank digital currencies. And so this is a problem. And Bitcoin maxis don't want to address this. They don't want to look at these issues. They block and, head in the sand.
So in your opinion, this is not really knowable, although you can have varying degrees of opinion. In your opinion, was Bitcoin invented to get us to single central bank digital currency? Was one way to view it is that it's been hijacked. The other way to view it is that they crowdsourced the creation of networks and you got the brightest guys in the world all generate on ramps and off ramps and networks and desensitizing the public to risks and things like that. Was it planned to get us to CBDCs or is that something that came later?
Excuse me. I'm moving more to the opinion that it was, simply because it's not private. I think the fact that it's completely open and transparent, although I think Satoshi's last comment, that public comment on the discussion boards was, well, maybe we need to look into privacy. So it's conceivable that it just wasn't well thought through, but the fact that it is transparent leads me to believe this. I've also been following what Jack Cruz has been saying. I actually did a whole podcast about this, trying to track, he did a podcast with Breedlove, where he makes this whole argument that drawing a line between Meyer Lansky to the creation of DigiCash, which was the precursor to Bitcoin, and then that Bitcoin was designed to solve the problems of DigiCash. DigiCash ended up being a little bit too centralized, so this was a way to create a digital currency that the CIA and the mob couldn't control. And I've been trying to vet what he's had to say, and I can't actually confirm some of the really big pieces and arguments that he makes. I find the stuff that he says to be interesting, but then I try to fact check it. So his argument was that it was actually created as a way to have a currency that wasn't controlled by the CIA or the mob. I don't have any evidence of that. But so I don't know what the original intent was, but I can tell you what the intent is now. And the intent is this is not even, explicitly, this is not an alternative to central bank digital currencies. If anything, I would call it non-fungible digital surveillance gold. That's essentially how I would characterize Bitcoin at this point.
Very flattering nomenclature. Well, okay. Michael said something I got to clarify. Because Michael's full of shit, of course, right? And
is that me? This Michael?
That's you. Oh, that's okay. You. Yeah. You're a Luddite like me, I think. And that is, you said that if you put in your code and you get one small portion of it wrong, your Bitcoin is gone. Is that correct?
Did I say that?
That was spooky. Well, no. I'm asking Aaron if he agrees with that statement, that one typo when you're hitting send or something, that there's a way you can just completely blow it out. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know you could completely blow it out. You either have your private key and your password or you don't. If you get it wrong, then you won't send the money. If you lose it, your funds are gone. But if you're
sending it to the wrong place? What about if you go to send it somewhere and you get the digit wrong there?
Yeah, then assuming you have enough and that goes to an actual wallet, then yeah, you lose your funds and there's no way to redeem those funds. That's a problem. That's a big problem. And it's a usability issue. This is why I like cryptocurrencies like Zano, where you can actually have an alias where it's, at Aaron. So you type in at Aaron into the wallet and then it looks up what the actual address is. So you're not typing, these 26 digits and letter combinations. But yeah, that's an issue and a usability problem. And people have been known to send millions, if not tens of millions of dollars to the wrong place.
So how do you protect yourself against some guys breaking into your house, putting a gun to your head and say, open up your laptop?
I don't know how much I should say about security policies, but you generally don't want to leave all of your crypto in a centralized place, nor do you want to have it on a mobile device with you. You want to have there's a company called Edge Wallet that has an interesting solution for this. They have something that's called, I don't know what they call it, disaster mode or something mode, where let's say this situation happens and you punch in your code and it actually takes you to an alternative wallet. So what they actually see is a wallet that may have a smaller amount of crypto in it. So they may rob you, but they're robbing you of a smaller amount, not your full amount.
So it's a fake, it's a bait and switch sort of wallet.
Yeah, it's a real wallet, but it's not your main wallet. And so
is there a way to send, let's say you had a ton and someone's got a gun to your head, and to send it somewhere where then you say, sorry, but it's now gone. Not permanently to you, but gone such that you no longer, no matter how much they want to blow your head off, you can't get it.
So this is personally why I have moved, and I need to get the updated book 100% into privacy coins. Because one of the problems with this is you bring up a valid point, and it's something that is really bad for people that have Ethereum and that have Bitcoin, because it is on a transparent ledger. So all of these companies, private investigators, and everything else can figure out, hey, you have this number of Bitcoin, you have this amount, and then that makes you a target. So somebody can find out that, hey, Dave has $3 million worth of Bitcoin. We're going to go over to his house. And then if you moved it, okay, well, that would be, that might be a way out of it, but you'd be able to see that on chain. You can't bluff that because they're literally going to be able to see your transactions. Right. I've moved into privacy coins where you can't tell how many coins I have at all.
Okay.
There's no way for you to know what I have. This is why I think it's absolutely important, not only as a defense against these kind of whatever wrench attacks, physical attacks, which are becoming increasingly popular, frankly, all over the world. People have been kidnapped. People have been murdered. This is some pretty gruesome stuff. But then you obviously have the state surveilling all of these transactions. And so, as I said, once you have money that's transparent like that and it can be mapped out, then you can be whitelisted or blacklisted, and then it really becomes non-fungible. So, you may be able to use your Bitcoin for peer-to-peer transactions, but everybody's going to be able to see it. The government's going to be able to see it. And you're going to have that liability. And then, how long before they put in some emergency measure that says, okay, well, these addresses are, they already do it with sanctions. They already put wallets on sanction lists. Well, the next evolution from that is, as we move towards social credit systems and everything else, is to add more granular control over how you can even spend your Bitcoin and how the reporting works.
Okay. I didn't know until you actually, earlier than this conversation, how transparent it was. I thought Bitcoin had a certain, you can't see it, you can't get it. And what I used to say to people is, look, somehow the FBI seems to be able to get it back, and when they want to. In this podcast I did with a couple of serious hodlers, I said, well, how do you protect yourself against that gun to the head? And they said, well, you can keep it on an exchange. And I go, but every day you guys say don't do that, right? If you don't hold the keys, you don't have control. So you're kind of contradicting yourself. So what makes you safer against the attack by a person makes you less safe by attack by the system.
Yeah, putting on an exchange is problematic, and that gets tracked. I notice this on X from time to time because people are tracking, these transparent coins. It'll say something like, hey, Jack Smith just moved $200 million worth of Ethereum to Kraken, right? This is actually problematic. People have no privacy in their transactions. And so now it's known that this big amount has moved to an exchange. And what's to prevent somebody from coming in and saying, okay, well, I now know you moved your coins to an exchange, which now has all this tracking associated with it, by the way. The exchanges work directly with Chainalysis and these firms to do reporting behind the scenes. So it's a pretty bad idea to put your coins on the exchange, not only because there's fundamental risk that the exchanges might get hacked or there might be a rug pull or they're dealing in a fractional reserve type of situation, all of those risks. But on top of that, now this is instant reporting to the authorities, which then puts you into this Chainalysis system. So once you've now moved your money to the exchange, that's going to be tracked through Chainalysis behind the scenes. And now the government's going to be able to see and map out everything that you've done. And I saw this recently as again, in this divorce case where they were able to get more of this person's Bitcoin transactions than they were out of a bank, because I think the bank only retains the records for 7 years or whatever. They were able to get the entire history. And so some people will say, well, if I've never used an exchange, then I'm safe. You know, let's say you acquired your Bitcoin through mining only and you never used a centralized exchange. Here's the problem. Let's say you did something with Silk Road, or you did something with an entity that was targeted by the government. The government very well may have taken those private transactions and said, as part of the deal, you need to tell us who the counterparties are in these transactions. And so all it takes is one transaction to be revealed, and then you can find somebody's entire ownership and transaction history. This is a big problem. I mean, I'm going to do a podcast on this because I've been watching these chain analysis videos. I've been watching the videos of these organizations that do this for law enforcement, and what their educational videos are to the people that they're training on how to do these techniques. I mean, Bitcoin is almost completely compromised at this point.
Well, the other thing I worry about is the fact that that markets tend to have the attention span of a squirrel. So today, let's look at equities. Nvidia could be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And the minute investors' attention spans move to something else in this very meme-like world that we live in. And it seems like the cryptos would be particularly sensitive to that. So if all of a sudden Bitcoin is deemed no longer for the cool kids, and there's some new form of something or other that is for the cool kids, the Bitcoin could just go into a relentless sell and end up at zero in theory. Is that correct? Or is that?
Yeah, I mean, again, the amount of propaganda that's gone into this. I mean, if you look at the number of people that are captured in the administration, and now you have BlackRock and other people. I know when I've done workshops, which is far better than the book, I'll do workshops where I show people how to download a wallet and actually get them all set up. But most of the time, people have never heard of the idea that Bitcoin was used as digital cash. They've only known it as a speculative investment. So the question is, the people that currently are big holders of Bitcoin are really effective at using propaganda. But you're right, if something switches, I think that there's some big things coming up. I think that the fact that they destroyed the economic model that we discussed earlier with the incentives for mining, and then the coming increase in electricity cost, is going to put significant pressure on miners. And they have really high fixed costs running these mining operations. So unless the price continues to go up, it's pretty easy for a mining operation to go bankrupt in a really short period of time. If there's a 20% price correction, what are you going to do? Based on, all of the electricity you're using, all of the equipment that you've leased. So that's an issue. There's another issue with Bitcoin, and this actually affects everybody, but the quantum resistance angle to this. Bitcoin is not quantum resistant. And I've been following this thing called the quantum doomsday clock, which suggests, and they've been tracking the developments in quantum computing for a long time. And I looked at this about 5 years ago, and I'm like, well, this is interesting, but it seems like it's way far off. But based on the increase in quantum computing power and improvements they've made in error correction, they're now estimating that in about, I think, 2 years and 6 months, they're going to be able to crack Bitcoin and related cryptography. So that's another risk on the horizon.
And the problem you're not only visible, but they can take it.
They can take it. And so the problem with this is that Bitcoin is so slow because the block size is small. Even if you came up with a new correction, people moving their coins from one wallet to another, that you'd actually run into capacity problems even doing that. So if you really only have 2.5 years of lead time, you would need to be putting out a patch soon so that people had enough time to migrate over. So there are a whole host of issues with this. And I mean, I think everybody should be more worried about quantum than they are. I'm spending more time on this. Like I said, I had discounted it, but then recently, I think because it's now a national security thing, because you have this, China, U.S. arms race, and you throw AI into the mix. AI is being used to make quantum computing more efficient and accelerate more quickly. So it's real, and it's on the horizon.
So what would the enthusiasts most vehemently contest about the things you've said? Well, if you were in a debate, what would they attack you on the most?
Well, they won't debate. And I mean, I'm saying this because I've tried. Actually, it was funny. Before Roger Ver was arrested in Spain, he and a friend of his put up $500,000 to debate Adam Back the CEO of Blockstream and one of the early Bitcoin Core developers, offered $500,000 to debate on hijacking Bitcoin. He turned it down. We're at the point now where they won't debate. So so I don't even think that they would debate, because I think this is actually part of the strategy that they have. And that actually, to me, tells me that deep down they realize that their arguments are flawed. At this point, this is just a number go up strategy.
Do you know if it's deep down? I mean, there's all these fairly well-known hodlers, and I never know where I'm looking at, right? It's sort of like if you're reading Twitter about the economy, you're looking at a certain stratum of the economic system, and it's conceivable it's a terrible echo chamber, because you're getting information from a guy you think is really smart, but he's not. And the question is, do these prominent hodlers who we see, do they know this, or do you think they have somehow, in your opinion, self-deluded?
Some of them know it, and some are self-deluded. But anybody that was in Bitcoin before 2017, I mean, I know not a lot of these people, but enough, and they have enough Bitcoin. They know better. And I've even seen them question this. I've actually seen somebody that said, well, have we turned into the bad guys? And then, in the next statement, well, whatever it is, what it is, kind of, I'm in this.
The baddies is the phrase. The baddies.
They become the baddies, but the fiat gains are too much for them to switch or to change.
Well, they could liquidate and get out of the game.
They could. And who knows? Maybe they are, right? I mean, there could very well be an aspect of this where they're going on and publicly stating all of this stuff to pump the price while they are liquidating and buying other assets. We don't know. Although it's trackable, I guess we could find out.
Well, so as I said, again, I try not to be derogatory, because I'm not smart enough to know if I'm right or wrong. Let's start with that. But I said something to the effect, any game that Larry Fink has now joined, I'd be running from.
Yep. Well, you said something earlier about, if people are trying to censor something, that's probably where the truth is. And I think that's exactly what's happened here with Bitcoin. That is actually why Roger Ver got into Bitcoin Cash. There are a lot of...
Tell the audience who Roger Ver is. Tell them
And Aaron, before you do that, explain your relationship with him too.
Well, I learned about Bitcoin from Roger Ver in 2012. He was speaking at an event here in New Hampshire, a Free State Project event called the Liberty Forum. And he was on a panel with a couple of other people, Charlie Shrem and Eric Voorhees. These are some of the real OGs in crypto. And I play the clip all the time. I mean, he was super passionate and super excited about it. And at that time, when he was speaking to this audience of libertarians, but Roger himself was a libertarian, and he was saying, look, this is a solution to central bank tyranny and wars all over the world. And this is a way to spread economic freedom. And, you could feel the energy behind it. But to take a few steps back from that, Roger learned about Bitcoin from a radio show called Free Talk Live, which is a syndicated radio show that's been around for 20, 25 years now. Ian Freeman and Mark Edge have been the two co-hosts of this show. And it's all about promoting libertarian ideas. They're based here in New Hampshire. They've been actively promoting the Free State Project. They're probably responsible for, more than 10% of the people that moved to New Hampshire, including me. I actually listened to the show and I talked to Mark Edge before I even moved up here. I'm friends with both of them. So in 2010, they did a segment about Bitcoin, and Roger heard the segment and went and read the white paper and fell in love with it so much that he actually couldn't sleep for like 3 or 4 days. He actually had to be hospitalized. He got so excited and so enthusiastic about the potential for the technology and the potential for spreading economic freedom that he became the first ever investor in the entire Bitcoin ecosystem. So he was before Silicon Valley, any of the venture capital community, any of Wall Street. He beat them by years. He was the only guy funding crypto wallets, crypto exchanges. And he wasn't just related to Bitcoin. He was, experimenting. People don't know this. He was the first investor in XRP. It was one guy who came to him. So when it was one employee, when it was one person and an idea, Roger funded it. He's funded a lot of experimentation, hugely believes in free markets. And I don't think Bitcoin or crypto would be anywhere near where it is today without Roger. I mean, he really spearheaded this to the point where he was spending his own money buying radio ads promoting Bitcoin without even having any specific gain from it other than to make people aware of the technology. So I don't know how many tens of thousands of Bitcoin.
So what was Bitcoin worth at this point in time, just to calibrate me using a set of time price?
I believe it was $1.
Okay. Because I looked at it at 10.
Yep.
And actually, I'm on record because I did a capital accounts interview with Lauren Lister, and she asked me about Bitcoin, and I was dismissive. And so there, it would be hard for me to escape that. I posed the question to, again, these hodlers the other day. I said, if you asked me, it wasn't a question, it was a statement. I said, if you said, look, in 20 years, Bitcoin is either going to sort of rule the world or essentially be gone. And I had to choose one of those two binary outcomes. I would have to choose gone.
Yeah, I would choose gone. And I think more importantly, we're moving towards tokenized money. And now these stable coins is backdoor CBDCs. I mean, I think we're moving towards a global digital currency that will be backed by energy credits. That's actually what the technocracy movement is all about. I actually think
Patrick Wood world. Yeah, I read Patrick Wood's book too. Yeah.
Yeah, Patrick Wood is great, and Courtney Turner. I've done a really big deep dive. In fact, I spend probably a third of my time now going through the whole technocracy movement, which most people are unaware of, but started in the 1930s. And the whole idea is, humanity is going to wipe itself out. The only way we can save ourselves is by elites picking scientists and engineers to make decisions for everybody on a top-down basis. And the way to do this was in this self-contained system where you have, energy credits. So you swap out the price-based system, supply and demand, with this energy credit-based system. So this is an idea that originated.
And these were kind of, as I recall, these were kind of the Trotskyites and the Bolsheviks and characters like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, and a lot of them were out of Columbia University, so I mean that tells you something. And by the way, this was during the Great Depression, so these ideas were being pushed when we were in an economic depression. But yeah, it's much more aligned with this kind of authoritarian viewpoint, and so that's pretty innovative. The idea of going to how do you do an energy credit based system in 1931, 32, right?
But now strange idea, right?
Strange idea. Now this is actually happening. Now we have this. I mean, you see Larry Fink, they're bringing back ESG was part of that, but I show people this because people don't believe me when I say it. So you can actually go to YouTube and type in Doconomy, DOCONOMY, MasterCard, and you'll see a video. This is a product that exists out of Sweden that people voluntarily sign up for. It's a partnership between MasterCard and the UN. It's a debit card that tracks your carbon usage, and it shuts off when you reach certain predefined limits.
Right.
And what this shows is that obviously in order to be able to do that, that means that behind the scenes, a number of partner companies have to be working with MasterCard to provide a database of what the carbon usage is.
It's purely a CBDC. It's purely CBDC.
It's purely I would say it's not even necessarily that it's central bank. I think the end of this is a global currency, one single global currency that is energy credit backed. And so I think all of this is moving into that. So ESG plus digital currencies, what Doconomy is doing and everything else is they're now laying the groundwork. They've formed the relationship so that they can track carbon. They're now tying it to financial transactions and censorship. And while at the same time, they're introducing digital currencies that can be programmed and censored and tracked. And so at some point, they're trying to move step by step towards that global system.
So how does the apocryphal climate change narrative fit into this story? Because it's an appallingly large story with appallingly shabby science supporting it. And there must be a reason besides just people getting rich off a grift. Is it tied to it? Is that part of somehow building the narrative around the energy and the...
Yeah, so far as I've been able to find, this was something that there are a lot of these shadowy groups that work behind the scenes, but the Club of Rome has been pushing this climate hysteria.
Oh, God, yeah.
for decades. And they've even uncovered the fact that in their own documentation, they state that they basically know it's BS, but they're pushing it because they need some kind of catalyst, some kind of emergency to move to this technocratic system. So it's always been fake. It's not a situation of, well, people, climate scientists got together and they thought this was a problem, but they were wrong. It was never a problem. It was something that was completely manufactured for the purpose of moving towards globalization.
Well, you can bribe the scientists with grant money. The centralized granting system, which in itself I've defended many times, but the centralized granting system, if you offer, billions of dollars of grant support to find information about climate change, you will find information about climate change, right? You will. And if you don't get funded because you found the wrong information, you will find the right information, or you will select for the people who do.
Yep.
And so you'll shape the narrative by virtue of who gets money and therefore who gets a mouthpiece.
And you had Robert Maxwell involved with his publishing empire that was putting out a lot of the peer-reviewed research and that whole aspect of it. And so, so it's been well coordinated by. In fact, I've even started because when I listen to a Patrick Wood or Courtney or even do my own research, you go on and do a podcast, and at the end of it, somebody's like, "How do I keep all of this straight? You've just now introduced 8 new organizations, 10 new people, and everything else." And so I'm actually building a graph database where you're going to be able to go in and see the connections amongst all of these people and groups. You're going to be able to track the money, and then you're going to be able to see the source of the information so that you can validate, how likely this is to be the true thing.
Call it a blockchain.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Information blockchain, right?
An information blockchain. But the point behind this is that it's real. And when I wrote my book, and as you read, again, it needs to be updated, but part of what I put in the first part of the book was an explanation of who's behind CBDCs. Why are they behind it? What is it all about? It's not some innocuous thing where somebody said one day, "Hey, we can make more, money more efficient."
Who is behind it? So repeat that.
Well, it's an ever-evolving network of people and organizations, but that are pushing a common ideology. So what I found is, and this is how I actually found out about Patrick Wood, but you have groups like the Trilateral Commission. And the Trilateral Commission, the tri in trilateral means North America, Europe, and Asia. And it's essentially a group of 400 to 500 people that serve on this Trilateral Commission. And their goal and their agenda has been to push globalization since about 1973. And they were heavily influenced by technocracy through Brzezinski. And the way that they've done it is they've done it by infiltrating governments, often at the advisory level. So as an example, in Carter's administration, all but one of his cabinet members were Trilateral Commission members. And almost every commerce secretary since the Trilateral Commission was founded has been a Trilateral Commission member. Well, why is that important? Well, the commerce secretary is the one that's negotiating trade deals. So there's been this push towards globalization. And this hasn't been going on just in the United States. It's been going on all over North America, Europe, and Japan for the last 50 years. So they've been putting in kind of the legal framework to move towards this technocratic system. You have the Council on Foreign Relations, you have the Bilderberg Group, you have the Club of Rome. There are certainly others. But what I want to do is map all of this out so that everybody can see this. And it's a changing group of players, although it is true when you actually dig into these organizations, there is a lot of Rockefeller and Rothschild funding of the organizations that are behind this. So there are some enduring players, but there are new people that get introduced throughout. And now I'd say Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance, and Elon Musk are 3 of the big driving forces behind actually implementing some of these technocratic ideas. And that's what's frightening, because it's confused a lot of people, including libertarians, who are like, well, hey, these are just successful entrepreneurs. We should welcome the application of their skill set to make government more efficient. And if you don't understand what technocracy is as an ideology separate from technology, you might actually buy that narrative, but that's not what's going on.
So you didn't trust Elon from the very get-go. I must admit, for the first, I'll say few months, although time's flying, so I don't know how long it really was, where it did look like he was going to use technology to find where the hell we were squandering vast sums of money. It was certainly a brilliant idea by that description. right? So the idea of tracking the money and the idea that these code heads could get in and say, here are the connections that you guys that have been hidden from you. The Doge story looks like it seems to have totally dissipated and that we're not getting rid of anything.
Well, I think the Doge story, I was skeptical from day one for a whole variety of reasons, because I've spent a lot of time studying Musk. And, you know, look, I bought one of the first Tesla Model S's in New Hampshire. I mean, I'm not an anti-technology guy, but there were some things that have been very troubling for me when you study Musk. First of all, his grandfather was the head of the technocracy party in Canada. And so just because his grandfather was the head doesn't mean that he is. However, he's made 2 or 3 posts public that he hasn't removed on X where he said Mars will be a technocracy. And then you start studying what's going on with what is dark MAGA about. You know, when he was wearing the dark MAGA hat and the shirt when, you know, helping campaign with Trump and everything else. And this ties into Curtis Yarvin. There's a whole ideology here that J.D. Vance, Peter Thiel, and Elon Musk subscribe to, which is technocracy, which Curtis Yarvin is pushing. Curtis Yarvin has been pushing.
I have been trying to figure out who Curtis Yarvin is for quite a while, and I haven't put in enough time to get it. Tell us about Curtis Yarvin.
Well, we're actually working on an article about it right now. I mean, he's an atheist who was a technologist who Peter Thiel invested in, one of his early ventures. And what he's been proposing right now is kind of the idea that, you know, we need to go back to more authoritarianism, and we need to go back to either a situation where we have kind of a neo-monarchy or a CEO that has more absolute power from a governance perspective. He's anti-democracy, which I get that.
So, so he's not right-wing. He's anti-democracy and bipartisan, tripartisan, whatever you want to say. So the right gets hung with his. He gets laid out there as a right-winger, I think.
I think he's the right-wing. I look at it as we don't have right wings or left wings. We have a right and left. Yeah. We have right and left division approaches for moving to technocracy. I view him as Yuval Noah Harari on the right. In the end, they both get to the same place. They both get to technocracy.
Speaking of douchebags, oh my God, Yuval.
But I think that they're both angling for it, and they're getting a lot of support. So they're kind of the pseudo intellectual ammunition for the right and the left, ultimately to wind up with technocracy. And so there were things about Musk knowing his ties to technocracy and hearing what he was saying. But then I also caught him people thought, oh, he saved free speech on X. Well, if you research and watch what he was saying when he bought X, yes, he was partially saying we need to save free speech for, you know, Western civilization and humanity. But he was also saying that this needs to be like WeChat, which is an everything app in China that's actually tied into social credit system. So he wasn't buying this altruistically for free speech. He was buying it to become the basis of an everything app, which he's moving towards, right? I mean, there's already digital ID kind of tied into this with an Israeli company if you want to get your blue check mark. And then X Payments is going to launch soon, and watch for that. That'll probably be somehow tied into stable coins. And, you know, the way that he can change the algorithm is downright frightening. People now have the illusion that it's free speech, but he even just posted something a couple of days ago that said something to the effect of, we're going to manipulate the algorithms to encourage people to have more children. Like stating it.
Yeah, he's got this obsession over the demographic shift of the world, which I understand the challenges it will pose. But as I've said to so many people, if a shrinking population is a problem, what you're really saying is you need new entrants to keep the game going, which is a classic Ponzi scheme.
Yep.
And so what we really have to do is figure out how to suck it up and you know, you can't make the argument that 50 million people in Tokyo that they need more, right? That argument just doesn't hold any water with me. And so this idea that the demographics is going to be a disaster, well, there are growing pains associated with a shrinking demographic distribution, but it also gets you to a more stable situation. So it's a path to potentially the right place.
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, but that's one example of what he's been pushing, which is clearly, I mean, he said overtly that they're going to manipulate the algorithms to encourage people to have more children. I mean, and he was explicit, and we're going to do this, right? And
I think
people
they
are
should
like cheering
encourage
this on.
young women to have more sex with old men. That's my standard line right there. Young women having sex with old men.
There you go. So he's stated that he's going to do this. And then there are other things where I've caught him. He did this thing for a long time where he said, well, hey, I funded OpenAI, and I've always wanted AI to be open source, and it's really important that we do this in a way that's safe. And then he sues Sam Altman and OpenAI, and what the discovery shows was that he was actually trying to steal OpenAI for Tesla. So he was completely lying to the public about what his intention was around open source and safety and everything else, while behind the scenes, he's basically trying to capture it for himself. So I've seen enough of this. But then when you look at, so I didn't think Doge was going to be successful, but let's look at what he actually did. They didn't save the money, but they did hook Palantir up with the IRS.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
And then when that thing falls apart, he does this fake thing. And I posted this as well. I'm like, he's going to end up supporting JD Vance. This whole America's Party thing is just, window dressing. We're going to end up with technocrats. Technocrats are going to win no matter what. The election's already over. But he forms this America's Party. And what are the first two items of the Americans Party? It's we're going to apply AI to the military, and we're going to apply AI to make government more efficient. He's never talking about reducing the role of government. He's only talking about the application of AI to make government more efficient. So there's no aspect of this that's about freedom or liberty at all. It's overtly technocracy at this point. Unfortunately, people are not understanding the nuance or the difference, and so there's a lot of enthusiasm for it.
Well, I think
the enthusiasm has dropped off, though. I think people are starting to wonder.
But also, I think people need to take into account, with Elon, is the fact that where's the guy made all his money, right? Government contracts. So why do people think all of a sudden, he's First Amendment, freedom, liberation? I mean, you can't do that and be attached to these government contracts and just say whatever you want. It doesn't work that way.
No, you can't. It's insane. I mean, again, he liked Obama when that suited him. He liked Trump when that suited him. He liked Biden when that suited him. But he's always been a technocrat. And I think that what's going on right now, and I warned people about this. I thought Trump winning was good to pardon Ross Ulbricht, and I was hoping that might extend to some of these other crypto lawfare victims under Biden. It hasn't really yet. In fact, in many ways, it's getting worse, but I always feared that, even if he did that, he's going to be horrible on policy. And if you observe what's happened, the amount of power that Peter Thiel has, I mean, JD Vance is the vice president because of Peter Thiel. JD Vance worked for Peter Thiel directly, then started his own fund. Peter Thiel invested in it. Peter Thiel invested $15 million in his Senate campaign. Peter Thiel is the one who introduced JD Vance to Trump. It's literally his handpicked guy. And these guys all are followers of Curtis Yarvin. And so it's pretty overt.
And Eric Schmidt equally embedded in this plot.
I don't know if Eric Schmidt is the one thing about the technocracy, I think the one way that we stop it is that, the psychopaths fight amongst themselves over who's going to control the technocracy. And I don't know if I would say if Eric Schmidt is in that PayPal mafia camp or maybe he's in a different camp, because there's certainly a division between the Google team and Musk. So I think that is he a technocrat? Absolutely, he's a technocrat. Is he a WEF guy? Is he pushing for all the technocratic agenda? But I think that he's in a different camp. I mean, you have Zuckerberg over here, you have Bill Gates over here. You do have different groupings of this, but the one that has the most power and the most momentum by far is the PayPal mafia. You have David Sachs, who is our crypto AI czar. He was part of the PayPal mafia. Thiel, and then you have Musk. And look at how much control.
Reid Hoffman. There's a gem for you.
There's another one. More on the Dem side. But if you look at it, they've got their bases covered, right? Whether it's on the Democrat side, the Republican side, or if they need to create a third party or hijack, maybe hijack the Libertarian Party or whatever, what we're going to end up with is more technocrats in Congress, and we're going to end up with a technocrat as president. But look at what's happened just this year. We now have Real ID, which is digital in 8 states. It took 20 years to actually implement that. They first drafted Real ID in 2005, but it was able to, sail through under Trump without any real resistance whatsoever. So that's the basis of the digital ID. You have the expansion of Palantir, which is, AI surveillance and the basis of a social credit system. Because once you're sucking in all of this data from all of the federal government departments, you can attach that to the digital ID. We have the Genius Act, which is a backdoor CBDC. I would argue that parts of the One Big Beautiful Bill are like the Patriot Act 2.0. I mean, there's $150 billion in that bill for AI surveillance and for the militarization of the police. Certainly, they say it's for fighting immigration, but of course, as we know, and you can research this, I mean, when does the government ever add surveillance or add a new capacity like this and then reverse course and shut it down? They never do. So it will be used in the future. All of the stuff that's being used for the border or whatever they claim it's being used for now will be weaponized against us. And all of that's happened just in this, 7-8 months.
Well, also with that, I mean, look at that was in that bill, and I don't know if it ever made it through the final was part of it, but the fact that states could not regulate AI has been federalized for the next 10 years. I don't know if that was in the final version of the bill. That was one of the things. The other thing is, look at how the budget's been expanded for ICE, and how I was just told this the other day that Matt Smith was on here and he was telling me it's a $50,000 incentive, a signing bonus if you join ICE.
So let me back that up. So everyone's mystified why you'd open the southern border. If, however, that was the preface to a highly authoritarian response to opening the southern border, then it seems like that's just the tee and the golf balls on top of it. Right? Opening the southern border was a minimum requirement to then give ICE that sort of power
to justify moving the budget up that much higher and then also to add to that as well is I wrote on X, I don't know if you guys saw it, but be careful what you wish for federalizing these cities, because it's a slippery slope. Just the idea that you're going to see National Guard, the visibility
I didn't like that at all.
Well, the visibility of these troops in these cities, and you start with one and then you move to another, to another, to another. And I'm not saying DC. I mean, I was there in June. It is, it's pretty bad, But in Chicago, New York, LA, San Fran, so on and so forth, Portland. But this is a very, very slippery slope into what Aaron said. They don't relinquish power back once they start implementing things.
No, it never does, and they certainly haven't with financial surveillance either, which is the way that they did the Genius Act and the stablecoin thing was really, I mean, it was ingenious in the sense that they made the central bank out to be the bad guy. And of course, the central bank is horrible, but the financial surveillance that we have on our current money comes largely from Congress, the Bank Secrecy Act, the Patriot Act, all of these other things. So it's not that the Federal Reserve is, necessarily going out of their way to add more financial surveillance or working on some way of acting unilaterally. Speaking of Ted Cruz, I spoke to Ted Cruz.
I've got someone who's going to be walking in the background.
Okay. I spoke to Ted Cruz at a conference a couple of years ago, and he'd put in this bill, this anti-CBDC bill. And he put forward a couple of times, and his whole premise was, well, yeah, we've got to put this in to, protect the. I was just saying, Ted Cruz for 2 years in a row put in some anti-CBDC bill, and I talked to him about it. I gave him a copy of my book at this conference, and we had a chat. And he said, well, yeah, we need to stop the Federal Reserve from acting unilaterally and implementing a CBDC. Well, that was not ever even actually a threat. That was just a complete show bill. And then you look at it, and it's like Ted Cruz has reauthorized certain aspects of the Patriot Act that added financial surveillance. So on the one hand, he's saying we have to stop the central bank from acting unilaterally. On the other hand, he's the guy that's actually reauthorizing financial surveillance. It's a hypocrisy, but I don't even know if he understands it or if it's deliberate, but it's very frustrating to watch how successful the Genius Act was, because you have people believing that this is this pro-America thing and that, now we don't have a CBDC, now we have nothing to worry about with respect to financial surveillance. And the reality is they've just captured $27 trillion worth of stablecoin payments and put it under the financial surveillance of Congress to be audited by the Federal Reserve. It's a worst case scenario.
Well, I'm tight with Ted now, so I'll talk to him.
Yeah.
Which is supposed to say you're side with Hitler, and then you'll probably get a response on X.
I know. You get famous pretty quick if you say you side with Hitler, I'm told. Patton died about a month later after saying that. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, Patton's death was about a month later in a car accident that some say was mysterious.
So this is one of the things that I've talked to Dave about. I've talked to Aaron about as well. And I mean, these people allow, in my opinion, they did not allow the other side to cheat, and they wanted Trump in there. It benefited them to basically take over MAGA as they move forward into this new system. And with the Genius Act now, I mean, I had Andy Schechtman on the other day, and we were talking about. He was saying how the stable coins are now going to be used on the front end, right, to basically inflate the debt away. If I'm explaining that correctly, like the Treasury, like it's gonna somehow the stable coins are gonna be on the front end in terms of attaching a stable coin equivalent to $1. Am I wording that right, Aaron?
I find all these stories coming out about the Bitcoin world and the gold world about how they're going to solve the debt problem by some shenanigan that I find none of them make any sense to me. The way you get out of debt is you create wealth.
Yeah, you create wealth and you or cut spending, some combination of where you end up with a surplus.
But it's not. They talk about like a gold-backed treasury, and they go, well, unless you're willing to forfeit the gold to people who want to cash them in, it's not going to be gold-backed. They say, well, it's going to be backed, 50 years from now. And I go, well, I'll promise anything 50 years from now. I don't care.
Yep. Well, I was going to say the stablecoin doesn't fix the debt problem. The stablecoin situation adds to the debt. So the purpose of the Genius Act was to require that stablecoins must be backed 100% by only treasuries and dollars. Whereas today, I mean, maybe these stablecoins aren't even backed at all, but I did see the CEO of Tether talk about having 1 million Bitcoin and or 100,000, I can't remember the number, and then some massive, amount of gold that was partially backing this. Well, they can't use that anymore. Now they're going to have to sell some of that, and they're going to have to buy treasuries. So the Treasury Secretary has said they're going to be able to use the hype of the stablecoins and the requirement that stablecoins must be backed by treasuries to sell an additional $2 trillion worth of treasuries. Well, this adds to the debt. This doesn't solve our debt problem. It makes the debt problem worse using stablecoin hype, and then it has the benefit of adding congressional financial surveillance on top of the stablecoins. It's a lose-lose from a freedom perspective and a fiscal responsibility perspective.
There's no such thing as a free lunch is another way people have said it for years. You can't just, someone made reference to it was kind of like the platinum coin. I go, well, the platinum coin was shown to be complete garbage right away, right? That was totally blown out of the water. And but they're talking about how it'll allow them to sell more treasuries. And I go, when you're in debt, you owe a ton of money to people, and the way you deal with that debt is you find a way to make real money, not to fake it, not to just print it, because then it's just inflation. I actually think the cryptos are inflation because they represent moneyness / wealth / So if you're worth $1 billion because you own a crypto, your spending habits change, right? And you actually have buying power that you didn't have, and it came from nowhere, right? It came from nowhere. So there's more money in the system if you're willing to expand the deficit of money to include, if I own $100 million worth of treasuries, I consider myself rich. And you go, well, but that's not money. I go, I don't care. It's got moneyness.
Yep.
How powerful has Peter Thiel become then in both your eyes?
I think he's massively powerful. I think he may. I mean, I haven't found anyone that's actually more powerful. He may be. I mean, I hate to call him a front man because he's really not a great front man. I don't think anybody would bring him out of from central casting to represent this movement. Most of what he does has been behind the scenes. So he's been funding a lot of U.S. Senate campaigns and a lot of other campaigns, and he has all of his political ties, and then of course he has Palantir. And I've been tracing a lot of what his other investments are. And if you look at across the board, he's funding a lot of things in a lot of areas related to technocracy, whether it's genetic related or AI or surveillance or whatever it happens to be. So I think he's probably one of the top, if not the top power players in the technocracy movement.
I have a right-wing George Soros.
Yep. And it's scary when you dig into him, personally, because he's obviously got a lot of emotional issues that are unresolved. I mean, for instance, when Gawker outed that he was gay, he got so distraught by it that he decided that he had to destroy Gawker. And so he funded Hulk Hogan's lawsuit over this sex tape in order to bankrupt Gawker. And so if you actually look at that behavior and some of the things that Alex Karp says, I mean, these are not necessarily stable people with hugely positive intentions that are kind of driving the train here.
Being outed as gay in the modern era doesn't strike me as the biggest unit of blackmail. It strikes me as an odd, you would think that,
Yeah, no, I mean, he's in San Francisco. I mean, this doesn't seem like it would be a big deal, but apparently
you got mad.
The persona that he was trying to put forward was not that. He was trying to sculpt a different image, and so this hurt the narrative he was trying to push, and so he reacted, very hostily about it.
So where did the political mobs come in? Where did the Clinton mob come in? Are they just bit players who are just for window dressing?
Passing through.
I mean, I think most of these politicians are not where the power is. The politicians are, pre-selected people that are compliant and will do what they're told. So I don't think
easily bought.
Easily bought. They're not. I don't think they're driving any of the strategy. They're certainly complicit in pushing it, but I think that their influence has waned. I think at this point in time, are they even relevant? To me, I don't even think they're relevant anymore. They certainly were for a while. And they certainly did their part to push, globalism and push forward a lot of these ideas. So you have the climate change stuff and everything else. They certainly did their part to push the technocracy narrative, but I feel like they're old school at this point. And the new class. So J.D. Vance is going to be very powerful. And again, I view him as a puppet of Thiel. I mean, he literally is going to be doing.
Well, his origin story is so preposterously utopian, right?
Yeah,
I'm not even convinced even the beginning part where he was supposedly raised by hillbillies. I mean, I haven't seen any evidence to contradict that, but his Yale to Thiel to the vice presidency was a ridiculous path.
Yep. No, it was a ridiculous path, and it was pushed by Thiel. And Thiel has been pushing things for a long time, so he's playing the long game. He even supported a lot of candidates that he knew they were going to lose, but he wanted to do it to show loyalty to Trump. So he put a whole bunch of money on losing candidates so that he could ingratiate himself to Trump.
My dog is snoring through my headphones, no doubt.
Well, that happened here in Arizona with Blake Masters. He was backing Blake Masters for Senate back in 22.
Yep. Yeah, and he's backed a lot of Senate candidates. So I think in the midterm elections, you're going to see Republicans. Whoever wins, they're probably going to be on the Republican or Democrat side. They're going to be technocrats. You'll have.
So is Trump being duped, or is Trump much more dark and sinister?
I think Trump is largely being duped. I don't think that Trump is driving any of the strategy. I think he's being duped. That's my personal view. I mean, that doesn't give him a pass.
No.
Because he's susceptible to being duped. But
yeah, just tell me you love him, and that's kind of gets you there.
Well, yeah, everybody complained his first term that, he surrounded himself with DC swamp creatures, and, he didn't know better because he hadn't been in politics. And so this time around, he said, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to surround myself with successful people. So he surrounds himself with technocrats and people like Howard Lutnick, and they are really driving.
Speaking of guys I don't trust at all, Lutnick looks toxic as hell to me. It's just my spidey sense. It's not even based on anything. It's just my spidey sense.
Well, this is part of the research that I've been doing. I've been working on an article for this, and I want to nail down some of the research, but some of it is absolutely trackable. So somehow, Lutnick's firm, Cantor Fitzgerald, negotiated a contract with Tether to be, I believe, the exclusive manager of all of the treasuries that back Tether. And so this happened a few years ago. And so then, out of nowhere, because Howard Lutnick was not politically active, he somehow finds himself positioned as the head of the transition committee for Trump, which means his role is to help find and vet and select members of the cabinet. And in fact, he was really angling and pushing himself to be Treasury Secretary. So imagine this is a guy that's now got the contract with the largest stablecoin player to manage their treasuries, and he's trying to become the Treasury Secretary. He doesn't end up pulling that off, and that was a little bit of a heated thing. But he still very proactively pushed the Genius Act. And I would argue that his firm, his family firm, his sons still run the firm, are the single biggest beneficiary of the Genius Act, because now Tether's forced to buy treasuries, and his family's firm has the, I believe, exclusive contract to manage all those treasuries, and they're making massive fees managing all of those treasuries. And so that is, I mean, everything I just said there is absolutely true. What's really interesting is the connection and how did he even get involved in all of this. And I've discovered recently that there's this guy in crypto named Brock Pierce who was connected with Epstein in 2011, started actually advising Epstein in 2011, and then was one of the early investors in Tether. I mean, I think there may even be some overlap with Epstein and Lutnick, other than the fact that they're next door neighbors in New York.
How do you spell Pierce? I want to see what.
Well, while you're looking that up, Dave, I mean, also, Tether appointed former White House Crypto Council Executive Director Bo Hines as strategic advisor for digital assets and U.S. strategy. That's on Tether's website.
Pierce is Pierce.
Yeah.
There's a deep story here. So he kind of affected me personally. So when I started my first company, I started an internet company in 1995. And we were getting ready to go public. I can't remember, 98, 99, I can't remember. And we hired this investment bank called Lazard Frere, which is this boutique firm in New York. It was a big deal at the time. And we were going to be the second IPO that they did in the internet space. Well, the first one that they were working on was something called DEN, Digital Entertainment Network. And Brock Pierce was the CEO of this. He had been a child star on Mighty Ducks or some whatever. I can't remember what all it was.
That's correct. That's what I just saw a second ago.
So he was positioned as this, brilliant young CEO running this company. And it turns out that it was they were like having sex with underage kids. They were tied into, I think, in LA, people, Bryan Singer, a whole variety of things. There's a documentary that you can find on online about the situation. I think one of the kids associated with this committed suicide. They have other people after the fact.
It's like a Nickelodeon story right here.
It was like a Nickelodeon story. And so this was outed as they were working on going through the IPO process. And so I believe Brock and the other people fled the United States when this happened. So obviously that IPO was shut down, and then that actually that closed the window for us. So that was my first entree with Brock Pierce. And then he's been involved with this Puerto Rico movement. He was involved with something called Block One, which was the largest ICO, initial coin offering, I believe, in history. They raised $4 billion, and they produced nothing. It was a complete scam. And then, but this is where it gets really interesting. He got involved with the Bitcoin Foundation. So Roger Ver and 4 other people, early devs and so forth, started a Bitcoin Foundation because, Bitcoin has no funding. It's an open source protocol. There's no organization behind it. And so a group of people got together and said, well, hey, we need to figure out a way to be able to fund these developers in a way where, the project isn't hijacked. So this becomes the main funding source for developers for a number of years. And remember, Brock Pierce is advising Jeffrey Epstein on crypto starting in 2011. Well, somehow Brock Pierce works his way onto the board and becomes the chairman of the board of the Bitcoin Foundation in 2013, 2014. And then this switch happens, which I talked about earlier. So now all of a sudden, the Bitcoin Foundation isn't funding developers. MIT comes in and starts funding developers out of this Joy Ito group. And in fact, the Bitcoin Foundation, as I understand it, even sent money and funded the MIT group. So some of the Bitcoin developers were transferred to the MIT group and actually started working on the CBDCs and also started working on some of the other changes to Bitcoin. And Brock Pierce is literally right in the center of this. Now, that's a lot of information that I want to dig into and get some of the history behind this. But this guy's been a major player in this, but it does seem like everything that he gets involved in turns in a particular way. So I'm doing more research on him, and I think people should keep an eye out.
He sounds trafficked to me.
Yep. And the more you dig into this, you hear about things in Puerto Rico and people ending up dead. There was one guy who had posted, so I can't remember his name, but he actually put out a post. He's like, I'm in Puerto Rico. If I end up dead, they killed me because of, and he talked about some sex trafficking thing related to this whole thing in Puerto Rico. So this is another one of those rabbit holes that goes incredibly deep. And now he's been involved politically. Now he's involved in the United Independent Party. And I've been told he's trying to infiltrate the Maha movement as well. So anyway, more research needs to be done on this, but it's pretty sketchy.
Hasn't the Maha movement already been, taken over though? I mean, they want to do the wearables. They want to do.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that it already has, but I think maybe he's becoming a bigger player in that.
Did Kennedy, I thought, was the most predictable appointment possible, where you said, look, one thing we know is what he will do if he gets into a position of authority. And that's not turned out to be so accurate. Did he change, or did we get duped, or am I just wrong on my read on that? What's your take on that?
I mean, I was never a fan because he believes in government. I mean, his whole approach is,
Well, he is a Kennedy. He is a Kennedy.
He is a Kennedy. And so he had this viewpoint of that he thinks the government can solve these problems. That to me was instantly the problem. And we're now seeing this, right? So what he's doing is, he's expanding the role of government, expanding the role of public health. I mean, he's going into not only talking now about wearables and AI, but I mean, even this thing with EBT cards, people are celebrating, oh yeah, we're not going to use food stamps anymore to allow people to buy sugary drinks. Well, okay, you've just signed up for more digital programmable money. So he's helping to put in more of the technocratic surveillance infrastructure. And when you see the interviews early on with Callie Means and some of these other things, and who
came out of nowhere. They came out of nowhere.
Well, they didn't come out of nowhere. They came out of PR for big food and for big pharma, and now all of a sudden they're the face of Maha. And I'm close to a lot of people in Maha, and I've heard them try to do the mental gymnastics around this. Saying things like, "Well, yeah, but we may be good at being activists and promoting medical freedom, but we don't know how politics works, so maybe we need these kinds of people." And it's just like, okay, I mean, this isn't going to end well, and it hasn't. So I think we're going to have a greater expansion of public health, and it'll be.
But you'll often hear Kennedy talk about something like a universal vaccine, and I go, that's scientific nonsense.
Yep.
But there's no chance. That's not how the immune system works at all. And I go, what is that all about? Why are we still vaccinating children with stuff that they need no vaccine? I thought Kennedy would deal with that stuff, and he has not.
I never, because big pharma, they're not going away, and they were never going to allow anybody to get in that would pose any real threat to them. Just the same as these technology companies, right?
So, do you think he was never a valid champion, or do you think he got commandeered quickly?
Well, I mean, on a somewhat related topic, why is it that one of the first things that he did was come out with a policy about speaking about anti-Semitism?
Kennedy.
Why did that happen? That was one of the first HHS policies was about making sure that they crack down on anti-Semitism within public health. I can't remember what the exact memo is.
That's not ringing a bell, but that would have caught my attention. Yeah.
Well, let me find it. So I don't know. I think maybe I'll be charitable and just say he had good expectations and he still believes in government, which is problematic. But even if you grant him that, even if you grant him good positive intentions, it's not the right way to go. We don't need more government in health. Medical freedom is not about more government. It's not about using the government to push your particular brand of how you define medical freedom. It's removing the involvement of government. And so he was never going to be that. I don't think there's anything in his bio that would suggest that he would have done that. But I don't think anybody expected the degree to which he'd be jumping on this technocracy train. Although when you look at Shanahan and her ties to Google, and even his getting involved with Bitcoin, which I found to be frustrating, he seems to have been heavily influenced by Silicon Valley. And the way that I look at this is, replacing Raytheon with Palantir is not a victory. Replacing Big Pharma with Silicon Valley, AI and their solutions to health is also not an upgrade. It's the same kind of thing, and in many respects might even turn out to be worse, but it's not different in any fundamental way, and it certainly isn't medical freedom.
New boss, same as the old boss.
Yep.
I also have this thesis that the internet was democracy's greatest hope and worst enemy. And I am now beginning to believe that we can't win that. And I know that you fight to win that. So it's hard for you to say we can't win it, but it feels to, and the reason is because to me, you control the internet, you've got this truly unlimited power, which means whoever controls it has the unlimited power. And someone said, I think it was Andreessen, who probably can't be trusted either, said, look at any profoundly communist organization or any profoundly supposedly democratic organization, you always find an oligarchy at the top. Always. And so I think the internet will give the oligarchy power no matter who has it.
So the internet, you're right. The internet, I don't know if the internet is the battleground. I mean, I think you have emerging things like mesh networks and alternative networks outside of the internet itself, because the internet is centralized and there is a big risk. If you look at what's going on, and I've been talking to people in New Zealand and Australia, and you see what's going on in the UK, and they're now moving to this model where, okay, well, under the name of protecting kids from getting access to bad content, we now are going to require IDs in order to get access to the internet. And to the point where in England now, I guess there's, people are moving to VPNs, and now they're trying to figure out a way to block VPNs. So part of the technocrat plan is that you will have to use your digital ID to access the internet. In China, where they've experimented with social credit systems, one of the things, the social credit systems are run differently in different provinces. So there's a whole bunch of different things going on, but usually the way it works is you get put into these different tiers. And if you get bumped down to the lower tier, it literally determines what access to bandwidth you have. There's some really interesting documentaries online where they show people being interviewed. There was one young woman who was saying, oh yeah, well, why would we care about the social credit system? If you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to hide. And I would only date a man that has a high social credit score. And then you have a journalist who spoke out against the government, who's now in this E tier, and he can't travel. He can't travel by air. He has low internet access. It determines what his housing options are. It determines what his transportation options are. So this is clearly an area where they're going. And I think Australia, New Zealand, and the UK are kind of leading the way on this. So it is a risk factor. And this is why I like things like mesh networks. And there are people like Ernie Hancock, who's trying to build off-grid communities with mesh networks that then tie into other mesh networks. I mean, look, this is a fight, right? This is a war. No, there's no predetermined outcome, and I'm not saying the odds are on our side, but I think it's certainly worth fighting, because in the end, I think free will's at stake.
Right. It's funny that the countries you mentioned also happen to have been at ground zero of the COVID lockdown battles. And that can't be a coincidence.
No, it can't be. And the disappointing thing is, with cancer rates higher than anywhere else in the world and everything else, there's still denial about the link. I did a couple weeks ago an interview in New Zealand, and I guess that they're all, Deloitte did a survey, and I guess according to the Deloitte survey, the people in New Zealand have a higher trust of the government implementing AI than any other country in the world. But somehow the outcome of COVID tyranny was these people are actually still compliant and still moving towards more technocratic solutions. It's kind of mind-boggling. I do want to say this, though. I did find this. On March the 3rd, 2025, HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy issued a memo announcing a joint effort by the Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Education, and General Services Administration to combat anti-Semitic harassment on college campuses, starting with a review of Columbia University's $51.4 million in federal contracts and $5 billion in grants. It was one of his first things. I thought that was weird.
Yeah, how's that related to his position?
Yeah. So what is the pressure? What's going on here? I have no idea. I mean, are these people leveraged? I mean, Kennedy had he had a lot of skeletons in his closet, but did he have more? I mean, Trump is not exactly clean either. So again, we talked earlier about, who these people that are politicians, they don't actually wield the power. They're often picked because they can be controlled one way or the other, whether it's through incentives or blackmail. And you do have to wonder, did something happen? Because I know a lot of people have been stunned and feel like they've been slapped in the face by how RFK has actually acted relative to what they thought it was going to be, with the Maha movement from the very beginning.
Well, Catherine also...
Tulsi Gabbard. How about Tulsi Gabbard?
I mean, this is another one I've been saying the whole time. I've never been a Tulsi Gabbard fan. I've never understood it. I mean, she was actually in military intelligence. So all of a sudden, she flips her view on war, but still holds a lot of these other issues. I mean, she does a little thing with the streak in her hair, but she literally worked in the PSYOP area within the military. And so now all of a sudden, people think that she's going to be this superhero, and she flips on... warrantless wiretapping, and then she flips on Iran. I mean, when she's been tested, now she's doing this other stuff where she's, I don't think is going to happen. Like this whole, we're going to arrest Obama. None of that's going to happen. I would be
that
stunned.
seems like a very straightforward argument where Trump, let's say Trump's playing a serious game. He basically is trying to put his offense on the field and make the Democrats put their defense on the field. That's what that seems like. And in the ideal world, Obama and Clapper and Comey and these guys will be chased around for 3.5 more years.
Yep.
It's not even that. These guys aren't worried. They're not worried about it.
No.
I think nothing's going to happen.
But it'll dominate the airwaves. Team Trump does want to dominate the news cycle, so they can keep the news agencies on their heels by having to defend Comey and Abbott, right? Then they win. They win their game.
So I've never been a fan, and also the WEF young leader connection and everything else. I've looked at her background. I'm like, this is scripted. And so I wouldn't be at all surprised if we don't see J.D. Vance, Tulsi Gabbard as the ticket in 2028. She's being groomed for something like this.
Right.
So, but do I think she's a good actor? No, I don't, because she flipped on war. But then when it mattered, the things that made her popular, she's actually subsequently flipped on. So to me, it's already a rug pull. But that doesn't mean she's not going to be popular. I mean, she was at Ron Paul's birthday party. There are a lot of people that still seem to be enthusiastic about this. So I think she's gaining more power. I wouldn't be surprised if she's not VP or really high up, and she's going to be pushing the technocrat agenda.
Do you think the elections even matter anymore?
I mean, I don't, but, and I've wasted a lot of time in politics, and I finally got to the point where, most of the voter turnout is driven by big data and AI. The voters are completely uninformed. I think the latest thing that I saw is 2/3 of Americans can't identify the 3 branches of government. And the candidates are pre-selected, just as RFK learned with his inability to even really get into the Democrat primary. So you're not giving
Trump, I don't think was pre-selected in 16. I think that was a shock.
Yep.
And then they kept him out in 20, which I am a sort of 95% confidence level rigged election guy. And then I think, as you kind of implied or said, that rather than trying to defeat Maha, you just absorb it. And so by letting Trump in, and they absorb it. So it's like the Tea Party wing of the Republican Party. It's no longer the Tea Party. It's just a group of guys with a label.
Well, this is what I
Where's Rand Paul been? Where's Rand Paul been in this whole thing?
Could I chime in here for a second? Because this is what I wonder is, was 2020 part of the plan to not let him back in? That way you could flood this country with all these people, and then you block the other side from cheating for 24 to get mad because now you flip back over to MAGA, and now you can use this as an opportunity to implement more of both the digital control on the financial side and the security side. I wonder if that was the plan all along.
I don't know if it was the plan all along, but the technocrats have a game plan, and they're going to use whatever the circumstances are to their advantage to push technocracy, and they've been doing that. So they may have used this as as a window to push this. And look, it's been great for Palantir, right? This is a wonderful situation for Palantir across the board. I actually think Peter Thiel has more involvement in this and the pulling of the strings behind the scenes than people imagine. And actually, you can see pretty clearly he's involved in it by who he's funding. But a lot of people don't realize he introduced J.D. Vance to Trump. I mean, when I was watching the Republican convention, like the idea that Hulk Hogan goes up there and does his thing, I'm like, okay, Hulk Hogan is, the guy that most of Hulk Hogan's, net worth, I think at this point comes from the Peter Thiel lawsuit that he funded. And then we've got J.D. Vance coming up. I think it might have even been the same day. And I'm like, this is, Peter Thiel's mark on this. And so, but I always found it amazing to how we convinced people that the guy that pushed Operation Warp Speed and added $7.8 trillion to the debt in one term, a record, that was the only guy that could save Western civilization. I mean, how do you gaslight people like that?
Well, and also don't forget about Vivek Ramaswamy too, right? I mean, in his backstory and J.D. Vance and their connection and their relationship.
He was too perfect too, right? He had the talking points. He's articulate enough to be able to really just rattle, a lot like J.D. Vance, actually. I mean, these guys are more articulate than the average politician.
They're friends.
They're more articulate than Jasmine Crockett, than AOC, things like that. I don't know.
Well, one thing I want to ask you guys too, as we kind of wrap up here, is your thoughts on Tether and what Tether's role could be in this monetary reset.
The way I look at what's going on with Bitcoin and Tether, I think we're going to need a new book to describe what's going on. And I think we should call it The Creature from Epstein Island. Because really what's happened...
You should you should grab that one.
Yeah, I probably should. That one. Because I think what we're witnessing in real time is every bit as bad as what happened with the Federal Reserve. So Tether is just this. When you research the background of Tether, first of all, they've never been able to complete an audit. But if you look at the people that are behind it, their backgrounds are: this guy was involved with the Ponzi scheme. This guy was involved with this. You've got Brock Pierce. This isn't exactly the team A for ethics from the very beginning. And right. So then you chart the progress of this. And this is fascinating. So imagine, who knows what the ultimate motivations were of this. There was a study done by, I can't remember which university in Texas, that showed that the Bitcoin bull run in 2017, you could attribute up to 70% of that to Tether. And so then you start tracking Tether and you realize, well, wait a minute, what if this isn't even backed by anything? And it turns out that one of the big owners of Tether, iFinex, is a big investor in Tether and a big investor in Bitfinex, which is a crypto exchange where they were moving a lot of volume that was involved in pumping the price of Bitcoin. So what if the whole hype around Bitcoin as a store of value was created by Tether, which was digital fiat printed out of thin air backed by nothing? And then that's created this now narrative where people buy into the story of Bitcoin as a store of value, and stablecoins is becoming the new currency, the new digital dollar. And now they're taking something that may never have been fully backed, and now they're forcing it to be backed by treasuries, and the Commerce Secretary's firm is the biggest beneficiary of this. I mean, it's pretty phenomenal to look at. But there is a lot to... Tether has been found... I don't know if guilty is the right word. They were fined once by the state of New York and another by the CFTC for not having enough reserves to back the token. And in one case, I think it was the CFTC, they found that, well, when they did the sample, they only had the funds 24.5% of the time backing it. But then when you track the money, it turns out what would happen is because they were doing because it wasn't an audit, it was an attestation that was a snapshot on 1 day of time to see if the reserves were there. People tracked that the exchange Bitfinex wired money to Tether. They did the snapshot, and then like the next day, the money was wired back to Bitfinex. So this thing is at some level it has been a Ponzi scheme of some sorts. Whether they now have they may now have the assets to back it because they've been successful. They may have faked it until they made it, and now they have the force of the state behind them in this relationship with Lutnick to add legitimacy to it.
Well, I'm looking right here.
Yeah.
They process more transaction volume than Visa in 2024 and 2025, but nobody's talking about it. And then you just said Matt Smith said this the other day too when I had him on. They can't pass an audit, right?
They've never been able to pass an audit. They had this, people would joke around about it. They had a banking relationship in the Bahamas, and people would always joke about, yeah, the audit is like the back of a cocktail napkin or whatever.
Panama Papers.
Yeah. The last thing that we have as an audit is Howard Lutnick, I think, speaking at Davos, saying, basically, trust me, bro, they have the assets to back it. There's no audit. And then they're claiming that, well, it's been hard for them to get, a big four accounting firm to do an audit. You would think that, they have allegedly $150 billion plus of assets under management. That would be something
you could pay somebody to do an audit. Yeah.
Yeah, if you can't get the big four to do that, I mean, this is what the big four is there for. So the fact that they can't even get these guys, I mean, the old Arthur Anderson types, they can't get these people on board for an audit, that is a pretty big red flag.
Let me ask you, so I want to back up on the Bitcoin. Michael Saylor and his Bitcoin, which is an enormous number. Who has those keys?
That's a good question. And I haven't tracked it lately. I thought that they were using Coinbase custody services. And so I would hope that, Coinbase is using some sort of cold storage solution with multiple keys. But I do remember that Saylor came out at one point and said, well, we're not going to show people what our holdings are. We're not going to make it public so that, you can track it in real time. And then within like 48 hours, some firm came out and said, here, we tracked what we think are all of the MicroStrategy wallets. But I haven't checked recently, so my information may be 6 months old. But previously, they were using Coinbase.
Coinbase is CoinDesk is now piled on Twitter because of some comment that I made about crypto.
CoinDesk is on. They're going after you for something on crypto.
Well, it's hard to say they're going after me, but here's a CoinDesk with 3.9 million followers embedding the statements I made about crypto to Tucker. So there's everyone's picking out their favorite little segment to jump in on.
Oh, I'm seeing this right now. 19 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Why he thinks crypto's true origins are a long-term government plan to acclimate people to CBDCs, which he calls an authoritarian nightmare.
Which I just said about an hour ago.
I think it's a reasonable theory. I'm torn.
Now they didn't criticize it though. They just posted it. But then they tagged. Oh, wait a minute. I might have that wrong. It's a pylon. This is really cool.
Real fan favorite on that. You're a real fan favorite right now the last couple of days, Dave.
Well, I got canceled in 2020, and it's a little like having a girlfriend dump you. After that's happened once, you kind of get a little thicker skinned, and you realize that you survived that, and you can take the beating again. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to have a brouhaha breakout that hurts Cornell. So they can beat on me all day. I don't care. It just gets me more followers and generates more antagonistic posts to them, I think. But yeah, you can. It never quite clicked that I would go on Tucker and that everyone who had a bone to pick with every single topic would pick it. The virality of every sentence that came out of my mouth is starting to show up. And again, the first responses were just people who said they loved it. So, the early responders didn't have any problems with anything I've said, best I can tell. But now everyone's finding something to jump on.
Well, coming back to, were you going to say something, Aaron?
No, go ahead.
Coming back to Tether then, what will their role be in terms of, will it replace the Federal Reserve in your opinion, or how do you envision what the Fed's going to look like through all this?
I have no idea what the Fed's going to look like. The only thing that would be worse than the Federal Reserve is if Congress had direct control over digital currency. I mean, I hate the Federal Reserve, but man, I had a talk with Ron Wyden. I was at this conference and there was a panel of these legislators talking about, they were all anti-CBDC, but Ron Wyden's viewpoint was, well, yeah, we should be issuing the currency directly so that we can, program its use. And, and so he's going, because I'm like, why in the hell is this Democrat on this anti-CBDC panel? And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, there is a worse thing than the Federal Reserve. But I mean, if you look at what's going on now with Tether, so the way Tether works is Lutnick's firm manages the treasuries, and then they still have to go through an audit with the Federal Reserve. So we're keeping all of these third parties in this, and then we're adding the programmability and surveillance of digital currency, and then we're allowing a member of the cabinet, his family, to manage the treasuries, which are still not audited. I mean, how do you even get away with this? I mean, how does this compare to, Biden being on the board of Hunter being on the board of an oil services company, or Nancy Pelosi doing insider trading? This is pretty bad. I mean, the digital dollar, the treasury's backing the largest thing moving towards a digital dollar, backed by the Commerce Secretary's firm, and it's not audited. I mean, that sounds a lot like Federal Reserve behavior.
Yeah, the not audited part. The Federal Reserve is also a confounding thing because there's something that people always like to say, but the claim is to the contrary, and that is they say, the Federal Reserve's private and this and that. And so they make it sound like it's this gigantic wealth accumulating device, but there's supposedly a clause in there that says after they've paid their bills, what's left goes back to the federal government. Is that true?
I don't know. Who knows?
The claim is that excess profits from their interest on their assets on their balance sheet goes back to the Treasury, which would be a way, for example, to fund the debt and the spending and shit like that. So it makes no sense. But what it implies is that nowhere in that equation is the banking system itself taking money from the Federal Reserve. They get power from the Federal Reserve, but taking money directly from the Federal Reserve. A lot of people think it does. They think the Federal Reserve collects huge amounts of profits, then the banks all keep it. And I think the claim is that no, excess, after you've paid your bills, your heating bill and your salaries of 1,000 economists and stuff, whatever's left goes back to the Treasury. That's my understanding.
Well, after you cover your operating expenses and paying dividends.
Oh, I don't remember that part.
So I just looked this up.
So that dividend could be the profit right there.
Yes. So the Fed, yes. So after covering operating expenses, paying dividends to member banks, the Fed remits.
So the dividends could be on the reserves. That's right. So there's where the Feds pay dividends on reserves. The idea being that if you don't want the money to be in circulation causing inflation, you bribe them to keep it at the Federal Reserve by paying them dividends, which always strikes me as an absurd bit of logic. If for no other reason, because by paying dividends, you actually increase the money supply, which in turn is inflationary.
Yep. So in 2024, the Federal Reserve recorded a net loss of $77.6 billion. So there have been no profits going to the Treasury lately. And the Fed has been accumulating a deferred asset.
Well, they do have a lot of garbage on their balance sheet, so that could be true, right? Their balance sheet is full of overpriced bonds and bonds that are not functional at all, the maiden lane crap and all that stuff.
Wouldn't they be the ones too, though, to administer universal basic income when it gets to that point? Because the Treasury can't do that, right? Wouldn't the Fed be the one to deposit that money into people's accounts?
I would think that would come out of Treasury. I would think that would be a congressional vote and a Treasury payout.
I don't think it'd be a congressional vote because they did it during COVID without that, right?
I don't know who made that call. Do you know who made that call?
That was the Treasury Secretary. Now that you say that, it was I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but
Yellen?
No, before Yellen.
Bernanke?
No. Treasury guy.
Oh, Treasury. Oh God.
I could picture his face. I can't. But I don't think that went through congressional.
Mnuchin.
Mnuchin.
Right.
Mnuchin. Well, and that's the other thing too is you bring up a name Mnuchin. Kind of going off track for a second, but Stephen Moran, right? He just got appointed to the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, and he's the one that with the Mar-a-Lago Accord and then ushering in the new system.
There's that iconic picture of his wife standing there with a sheet of currency with this look in her eye that you go, man, I wouldn't marry her. She'd take you to the cleaners. Yeah, you've seen that picture of Mnuchin's wife with the sheet of money at the treasury.
Blonde, the blonde wearing the jet. Yeah. That's iconic.
No,
that is iconic.
So the Paycheck Protection Program funds were paid by the SBA to employers.
And the SBA didn't have that kind of money though, so someone had to give them a big wad of money because it was in the bazillions.
Yeah, but was that all included into like individuals who just got direct
like
deposits?
$8 trillion, of which a small amount made it to the average people, and a large amount made it to their friends, right? So
it was the Treasury. So Congress passed the CARES Act, which authorized the money, and then the Treasury funded it through the SBA.
Was that to the individuals then as well? Like people, just random people like myself that were getting, I think it was $600.
Go direct, right? You know that story, Mike, about how in 2019, October, there was a white paper written by BlackRock saying the next crisis we have, you're going to have to go direct. That's what they call it, go direct. They said you're going to put money straight into people's bank accounts. Next thing that happens is you get the repo crisis, which I'm to this day convinced no one knows what was happening in the repo crisis, where the repo rate was spiking up to 10% spasmodically. And I've never seen an explanation for that. I've seen people who seem to bullshit, and then all of a sudden we're in a COVID lockdown. And I can't exclude the theory that the COVID lockdown was to put the global economy into an induced coma with justification to lock it down because the economy basically was completely flatlined at that point.
But now these instruments are in place, so for them to, and they won't say UBI, they'll make it like, I could see Howard Lutnick saying, we've collected so much money in tariffs and now we're giving it back to the people.
Oh, I shit a pickle as soon as they started talking about giving $5,000 to everyone. I go, you haven't gotten within a country mile of balancing the budget, nor did Clinton for that matter. That was a total crock too. And you're talking about giving money back. And that was just stupid.
But I could see them. I could see them.
Serious.
Can't you see? I could see them doing that though.
They'll do it, but you got to be gullible as hell to think that those make sense.
But that's how people are, though. They'll take it because.
I know.
And like I said before, Aaron, I'm with you. Where I never had expectations for any of this, that any of this was going to change when this new administration came in.
I did. I got to confess, I must be gullible or something. I still think the Trump administration is sort of our last hope, and that hope is like the sort of the light in my eyes dimming.
That's why I hate that word. That's why I hate that word. Anybody who listens to my show regularly know I hate that word.
I know.
I didn't have good expectations, but it's far worse than I thought. It is much worse than I thought it was going to be.
My expectations were higher, and I agree with you. It's far worse than I thought.
But I will say, so the individual payments were done by, remember, it was the IRS actually. So it was the Treasury Department through the IRS that handed out the stimulus check. So now think about how easy this would be now. Next time there's an emergency, you're not going. But imagine this: what you're going to get instead is you're going to get Tether. They're gonna pump it through Tether. So now you're going to have a digital programmable stimulus money. They could use Tether or any of the other officially approved, licensed, regulated stablecoin issuers. That could be the platform, and that's the way they could start to use an emergency to move people. One keystroke. I absolutely 100% believe that they're doing that. I've written some articles on Brownstone where I've been laying out that, look, this doesn't stop with just tokenizing money. Next, through the Clarity Act, they're going to start tokenizing stocks and bonds and commodities. This is what they're pushing for. And people get excited about this. Larry Fink has been pushing this. If you're excited about Larry Fink, if you're excited about the tokenization, of stocks. And do you really think BlackRock is going to give up control in any kind of a tokenization scheme? This is how we end up owning nothing.
I think the solution is private equity going into 401ks.
That's coming. That's happening, isn't it?
I think it is. I think it's here. I think they've cleared it. Is that right, Mike? Do you think?
No, yeah.
That is catastrophic. I just read a book on private equity, and I'm fairly convinced that it was designed to front run any books that would actually tell the truth. Because when I was done with it, it was like, those were very soft-pedaled stories in that book. It's called Bad Company. And I hammer it on Amazon. It'll be interesting to see if other people say, thank you, that was helpful. Because it was all stuff where you say, okay, they're greedy, we get it. But it didn't tell the real nightmare scenarios of private equity, which is going to be a true nightmare, right? The next financial crisis we have, the word private is going to be in every headline. Every headline.
I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet, though. Are both you guys,
I'm shocked.
Aaron, that the system has lasted as long as it has?
Yeah, I am surprised. And to me, it's come down to what I've realized in writing the book and doing workshops and everything else is nobody understands how money works. Nobody understands how the Federal Reserve works. It's not taught anywhere. Where would you learn all of this? And so people, I mean, think about it. We teach fiscal responsibility as being, did you balance your checkbook on top of a Ponzi scheme correctly? That's what determines whether or not you're a fiscally conservative.
Which they didn't, which no one can. I was going to teach we have a writing course at Cornell that was actually very well known, and they offered subjects, any subject you wanted, and every freshman had to take 2 semesters. You had to write papers. That was the key. So you could study Dostoevsky, history of science, you name it, art history. And I was going to teach a personal finance course. I wasn't quite sure what I'd put in it, but I said, I can put together a semester of information for a freshman who might then say, maybe I shouldn't major in sociology after all, right? and then Chat GPT blew into view, and I said, the last thing on the planet I want to do is grade a bunch of computer written papers.
Yep.
And so they wouldn't learn any. And they've done studies when these guys do these Chat GPT papers, they can't pass a quiz on their own paper. So we are going to have some super stupid people in this world.
We are, and I actually saw some other chart about the usage of Chat GPT dropping off when the
at the end of the semester. At the end of the semester. Yeah, exactly. I didn't know it was that dominated by colleges. I would have predicted to be that would have been more of a flicker at the top. But as I talked about with Tucker, writing is learning, is understanding, is, and if you can't write it down and make a coherent narrative yourself, you don't understand it.
Yep.
And ChatGPT and all the AI is going to get rid of it's going to get rid of the understanding part. And just before I got on here, I had to deal with my internet supplier because it turns out I dug up the internet cable by mistake at the cabin, and I actually got sparks, and so I ran to my computer. We still have internet service, but I got a guy coming in tomorrow to make sure I haven't poked a hole in the cable. But it took me so long to get to a person to tell them what the hell I needed, and we're not far from having a system where no one has a clue what to do. There's no overriding mechanism. That's why the talk you guys did before bothered me so much, because the focus on AI was on the little things. And that's what I think is really going to be important is that there will be no one at the hardware store who knows anything. They won't be able to help you with anything. And if AI is writing the programs, there'll be no one who understands the code. There's be no one who will say, okay, let me help you out. We can override this. It just, nothing will work right. And that will be authoritarian.
Let me ask you guys a question here, and then I swear we can wrap up. If this, the direction we're heading with all this global monetary reset, is it going to be one of those things where it's like a switch where they hand off occurs overnight, or how do you envision that moving over? Gradual or like a kill switch?
I'm saying gradual, but I'll let the pro do it.
I think it's been happening gradually for 50 years. So I think it's one of those things where, who was it who said, how did you go bankrupt? 2 ways, gradually, then suddenly. I mean, I think the gradually has been going on for 50 years. This is why I write a lot about the fact that, in many ways, we already have a CBDC. All of our money is already digital. It's already being tracked 13 different ways by the federal government. It's already programmable. So in essence, what we don't realize is that we're actually already 80% of the way there. So when you go that distance from 80 to 90 to 100%, it will feel like it's sudden because it'll be the finality of the previous system. But we've been easing our way into it for decades.
So
that's the problem.
My Zoom group had a guy named Stephen Coughlin, and he was this mild-mannered guy. This is a Zoom group I've been in for about 4 years. It started about COVID vaccine and COVID ethics. And Stephen one day starts chatting about Hegelian philosophy, and everyone's listening to him going, this guy's going off the rails, right? And then he's starting to make sense, and someone interrupts him because we didn't all know each other, and said, Stephen, are you a professor of philosophy or something? He said, no, I'm trained in law, but I'm a former national security analyst. And it turns out he was a legend. He was the GOAT in radical Islam at the Pentagon, I found out. And at one point I said to Stephen, we keep using the word them, and it was having to do with people deciding to lock down, things like that. I said, who is the them? I can't even remember what the topic was. And he said, well, I don't like to name names. And it was a profound statement he made. He said, because if I name a name, you will then think you understand. So if I say Bill Gates did the virus, you'll say, okay, now I know what's for dinner. Game over. He said, so I translated that into a much, much more broadly based maxim that said, never draw a conclusion that gets you to stop thinking. So that's why I, for example, reject uniparty language, because I say that's a way to get yourself to stop thinking. Even though I understand why people do it, it's also a shut-off switch. And he said, I like to think of the elite as a self-assembling oligarchy, where they don't know each other. Some do, some don't, but they all have aligned interests. And I immediately had an image of a murmuration of starlings, where no starling knows what it's doing, but boy, those murmurations are very organized. And so it is, human social animal behavior at the top. Now, the question I keep coming back to is why? Why do they care about doing this crap? And the money answer never works for me. The getting votes doesn't work for me. They seem too pedestrian. Why? And I ultimately come to the conclusion that somehow it has to do with neurotransmitters. That if we go to a movie to laugh or to be scared, or you have sex or you eat a good meal, and it's all about getting neurotransmitters. But if you are rich and powerful and you can get any chick and you can buy anything you want, how do you get your neurotransmitters? And I think the answer is by being a punk-ass bitch authoritarian. So
I think it could be that, or even if you take the most charitable example, like if you study David Rockefeller,
I can't be charitable with David Rockefeller.
Well, yeah, but let's say you have these people that, okay, this guy inherits all this money and he actually believes this stuff. He believes that he needs to be a steward and he needs to help humanity, because certainly good intentions have created problems in the past. I think that there really is a potential that some of these people actually buy into their argument that unless we have these elites and scientists and engineers solving these problems, it's an existential threat to humanity. I think there may be some people that believe that. And then with that as kind of the driving ideological force, then you do have these other people that are just opportunistically getting involved with that narrative because it benefits them. But I do think there's clearly an ideology moving here. I mean, they are moving to technocracy. And if you look at the WEF and the UN and Bank of International Settlements and all these organizations, there's an end point here. I mean, the UN has always been about global government. This was, you know, an original, the original vision. When you go back and read what they were talking about.
And to be charitable is to keep us from killing each other, right? That's the charitable interpretation.
That's the charitable.
But
The
uncharitable one is that David Rockefeller was supposedly having sex with Annika Lucas when she was a little girl. Annika Lucas being one of the most famous trafficked women in the world.
Yep. Yeah, so there's a charitable view, and then there are all of the other views. But even the charitable one doesn't work. So there's no good answer here either way. But I think the best thing that we can do is to chart out and map out who these people are, and to try to fill in the information. Because again, it's not one group. It is a somewhat changing set of players, but we need to stay on top of who those players are and watch what's happening. And this is why I'm really alarmed at what's going on with technocracy, with Peter Thiel, with Elon Musk. I mean, think about it. You know, by the end of this year, he'll probably have X payments, Grok 5. I mean, you're going to have the WeChat system. I actually put out this, you know, fake joking around kind of after Trump won, where I drafted what would an executive order look like, where he pushed digital ID, CBDCs, and a social credit system, but he used MAGA language. What would that executive order look like? You know, let's call it MAGA bucks or Trump bucks or whatever. And it's just, in all honesty, if you look at what's going on, that is kind of what's happening. They're implementing the same stuff people hated when it was Klaus Schwab and the WEF talking about it. They're celebrating under Trump, and it's going really
And I
quickly.
think that's why, instead of stopping him getting elected, they just absorbed him. I think they had a guy. They said, okay, this guy has the faith of the people. Let's just use that. So I think Mike's right about that. They commandeered him once they realized that the masses would put up with a lot of crap coming out of Trump.
And they didn't let the other side cheat. I mean, there were enough states that had measures in place to, like, and they proved it in 2020 to be able to get away with it. And
to be frank, his opposition wasn't exactly up to the game, right?
Was that done on purpose too, though? That's what I wonder as well.
That's a fascinating question.
You have
Two
somebody
really pathetic candidates all in a row.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah. I mean, I've heard, you know, I heard all these things after November, all that, you know, they were bending the knee to him, they were afraid of him, but you know what, you cannot convince me. I was wrong where I thought the outcome was going to be, but I've been consistent in everything, you know, everything else since, where you cannot convince me that these big tech people that just stood down or provided no opposition at all in 24 like they did in 2020, that they were bending the knee. I just don't believe it.
Now, there are some wins here that you got to sort of say, well, I feel better at least about that. And I think, for example, they cracked the fever on the alt-left woke world.
Did they, though?
Well, I think they did. I think they've got people scrambling. Now, there's still brush fires to put out. But I think they buttoned down that chapter, which might have been ready for a death anyways, right? It might have been ready to go because no one liked it. No one liked it.
But I also look at it like they accomplished what they needed to accomplish because people are hesitant to speak. People are hesitant to question anything. So it ran its course.
I'm finding that out today.
Right. Why? What? Oh, yeah, for Tucker. But it ran its course. But it is by no means is gone. It never goes away. DEI isn't gone.
No, but I think it broke the fever of the completely irrational. I mean, DEI and woke had gotten insane.
But it's not.
And I'm pleased to see it sort of join the human race a little bit.
I mean, I've enjoyed some of those stuff too. I mean, his executive order that he signed, you know, with girls' sports. I mean, I thought that was a great moment. But this stuff is not gone. It's still happening, and it's never going to go away. I mean, I don't know. I've said this a million times. I mean, I never had expectations for any of this. I mean, this is, you know, it's not a superhero movie. I've had people, you know, message me things like, I'm like, this is not a superhero movie. It's not a Jack Ryan story. We're not living Patriot games or the Hunt for Red October here.
So what would a real sort of progress, victory, whatever, look like? What would you be, you know, some people talk about a civil war, and I go, well, let's start with no one knows who to shoot.
That's not going to happen either, though.
Well, you know, it could, but it's certainly not the outcome you want, right?
As long as people's credit cards are still working and they can get their lattes and they can
well, but they
eat.
might not be able to. Right.
Well,
At some point, that the system really could break that much, and then you've got a problem.
yeah, the Civil War stuff. I've heard about last year. I heard of all last year. I'm still hearing it. You're right. Anything can happen, but I don't. As it sits here today, next week. At least in my little sphere.
No.
No. They'll have to manufacture a civil war because
That's right.
there's nothing emerging organically. But I will tell
Or
you,
it would have to be just a complete collapse, right? They'd have to lose control of the system and have it really just go down to the studs fast.
But I think they're putting in the technocratic infrastructure. If they're tracking carbon credits, they're putting in all this surveillance.
Right.
And I think it is interesting to watch this stuff with aliens. I think they could use an alien thing as a rallying point. They could use some kind of emergency. I wouldn't rule out anything. But are you seeing this? This is now popping up again.
I know.
And JD Vance waded into it. And so, and now there's this, I just saw something today where that's heading towards us, they think might be nuclear powered. And then all of a sudden,
they're going to have to land in my backyard for me to believe it, right? I was telling Mike before we started, there was a Ben Kingsley movie with an alien that landed. It was an entertaining movie. I can't remember the name of it. I should look it up. Now I keep hearing these guys talk about aliens, and I know smart guys who actually take it seriously.
Because Anna Paulina Luna was on Rogan, and she was talking about that too.
There's some real geniuses in there.
Whenever I hear the alien conversation, I kind of chuckle to myself because I just think about it. If people really want to go see aliens, go to Walmart and you'll see all the aliens you want to see.
I know.
Sorry for people that go to Walmart. I shop at Walmart too, but I just.
Okay, the name of the movie is called Jules. Mike, you should watch it. It's called Jules, and it's an alien movie. It's very entertaining. It's a feel-good movie. It's not bad.
I'll have to look that up. I told it.
It's got parody flavor to it.
I told Aaron we're at the end of the year. I did this last year with a couple of people. Luongo was one of them. Pete Canonas. I did a whole week during the holidays. We just talked about movies for an hour and a half, and just really went back and forth. Put the world problems aside and talked about movies. So
I did a tweet at the end of last year that went totally viral, and I said let's crowdsource this. Name a nonfiction book that truly changed the way you look at the world. And I said, of course you can waste your vote on the Bible and things like that, but that's trite. I said something that we might not know about. And I got something like 2,500 answers. And I used AI to try to sort through it, but I don't trust AI to get it right. But I did try to figure out, but 2,500 books. And they were not just the Bible and stupid things and Gulag Archipelago, which, by the way, I just read an article about how that was supposedly a crock of shit, too. But you never know what to believe. A friend of mine who shall remain nameless because he's a prominent podcaster, and I don't want to hang it on him because he said it over a phone call, said he read almost all the Kennedy assassination books when he was younger. And he thinks that most of them were designed to deceive. They were just debris. And, sell books, but to just throw bullshit out there. And that's the idea that I think has taken over the internet, and that is to raise the noise level so that you can't detect signal.
Well, guys, I think we covered a lot today. I don't know if we solved any problems, but I think, it gave a lot for people to think about.
I've created more today than I've solved. Let me put it that way.
No, I think we addressed a lot of things.
Yeah, we did. That was fun. And again, I appreciate your view, Aaron. I will ponder reading your revised book, but getting a double read out of me is tough.
There's no need for that. The other one that I'm writing it's The Revolution Will Be Tokenized. It's going to be completely different content.
Then I'll read that one.
So yeah, that'll be a better one.
I'll read that one.
Make sure you check out the Antichrist, a 4-part lecture series by Peter Thiel, which is coming up.
I just saw that. I saw that right before we got on.
I'll tell you, Peter Thiel is interesting to listen to. Forget about it. You have to, in the back of your mind, say, look, this guy, has red eyes, and almond eyes, and probably is the devil incarnate, but he's entertaining to listen to.
Aaron, where can people find you?
You can find me at daylightfreedom.org, and you can find me on X at Aaron R. Day.
Dave, under your desk, and I have you on so much, I know this already. On X?
On Twitter, yeah, at David B. Collum. You might even find me in the dean's office at some point.
Or Senator Cruz's office, maybe?
Yeah, I'd love to go with Senator Cruz. That would be entertaining. I'd really love to go with Mark Levin.
Let me volunteer volunteer to host this debate.
Yeah, you host a debate. I was supposed to moderate a debate last night for Zero Hedge, and somehow I fucked it up. They expected a response. I didn't give it, and they canceled it on me. I go, what was that about? We'll do it. So in any case, yeah, this was fun, and I'm glad it worked out because, as you know, I double booked this last couple hours by mistake today, and had to scramble.
Well, guys, I appreciate. Go ahead, Aaron. Sorry.
I was gonna say I enjoyed it. Thank you for putting this together, and Dave, it was great to connect live. I thought this was a good conversation.
Well, I did want to talk to you.
Well, it's all the more reason to have another conversation because there's going to be a lot to talk about here. So I appreciate you both for coming back, and I look forward to continuing to follow your guys' work and more conversations ahead.
Sounds great.
Adios.
Mic drop.
Thank you.
Have fun.